Chapter 47. Is this guy an idiot? He knows he can't do it, but he still wants to do it. Looking at Ryudo's back, dancing costume, said with a complicated tone. Originally, Jidao was a group of people who were isolated by society. This Jidao young master had to build a good relationship with other people. The process must be quite difficult. He is an idiot. He knows it's impossible, but he still wants to do it. Even if he may hit his head and bleed, he won't stop. Suddenly, Colored Glaze couldn't help but think of that guy's confident expression in front of her yesterday. Young miss, forgive me for asking, but why did you smile so happily when you mentioned this? After feeling the surprised gaze of dancing costume next to her, Colored Glaze realized that she was smiling at Ryudo's back. She didn't know why, but when she knew that this man would bravely move forward for his ideals, her mood suddenly became better. I just want to laugh at him when I think of how that guy will be rejected everywhere. Is that so? But your smile is obviously not mocking. Ahem. Dancing costume, it's about time. Get ready to go back to the classroom. Before the dancer could finish her words, Luli interrupted her, which was something she rarely did. She then stood up from the cushion, put on her shoes, and left. She left in a hurry and in a sorry state, as if someone had seen through her. Not long after, the bell that signaled the beginning of the afternoon class rang throughout the entire Kyoto First High School. However, the students of Year 2 class heaved a sigh of relief before class started, because the Demon King, Ryuto Kiryu, didn't appear in the classroom. Regarding this kind of skipping class violation, the students and teachers of the second-year class remained silent, as if no one wanted to mention that name. At the same time, next to the water tank on the rooftop of the teaching building, the Demon King was lying lazily in a corner, looking as if he was just waiting for death to come. Of course, Ryudo wasn't waiting to die. He was just waiting for the bell to ring. In Ryudo's view, it was meaningless for him to go to class now. He couldn't move freely in class, so he couldn't achieve the goal of getting closer to someone. So he simply skipped class, lying on the rooftop while resting and waiting for the time to pass. Kyoto First High School had a lot of club activities, and the afternoon class was also very short. After class ended at 3:30 to 6 o'clock, it was club time. And the three people that Ryudo targeted as social targets were all members of the club. If he wanted to find them, he had to wait until after 3:30. Otherwise, if Long Do swaggered into someone's classroom to look for someone, maybe someone would call the police directly. That was how he was now. As for the rest of his free time, Long Do decided to consider increasing his attributes and purchasing items. After lying down for a while, Ryudo opened the Krypton Gold Fate reversal system and looked at the situation in the system. Name, Ryudo Kiryu. 16 attributes. Wisdom LV1, Constitution LV3, Courage LV3, Insight LV1, Charm LV1 title. Extreme Young Master, Charm reduced by 1, Courage increased by 1 equipment. Black Star Pistol normal, Taser normal, Dagger normal tools. Hooligan Velcro total assets. $13. $458, $550. It had to be said that Long Do felt a sense of accomplishment when he saw the system display. First was the change in total assets. Originally, after Ryudo spent $500,000 to buy the Hooligan Velcro yesterday, his total assets were only $45 million. But because of the merit of solving the Sakata Rebellion, Ryudo was awarded the First Class Hero Award and a bonus of $10 million by the Rulon Group. Although in fact, after confiscating Sakata's property, the unexpected wealth the organization received was calculated in hundreds of millions. But this money could not be given to Ryudo. Not to mention that he was not officially the second-generation leader. Even if he was, the amount of money he could use was not as much as he imagined. After all, most of the organization's income came from public funds. They had to pay for all the expenses, so it was impossible to spend as much as he wanted. Fortunately, with the bonus of the First Class Hero Award, Ryudo's assets became $45 million. He suddenly became rich again. At the same time, because the members of the Rulon Group did not have bank cards, Ryudo received stacks of cash, which were heavy in his hands. Although this did not affect the purchase of things in the Krypton Fate reversing system, the ability of this SH*TTY system to collect money was definitely the best in the world. In addition to the 10 million starting capital that he just received, Ryudo also found some help provided by the system, such as the use of the equipment bar. Whoosh! As he quickly raised his hand, a pitch-black Black Star pistol appeared in his palm. The whole process was like magic. According to Ryudo's exploration last night, a total of 3 items could be stored in the equipment bar. After storing them, they could be taken out at any time. For example, the dagger that he suddenly pulled out and asked the dancing costume to cut her finger not long ago seemed to be hidden in his sleeve, but in fact, it was taken out from this storage space. Otherwise, if he really hid the dagger in his sleeve, he might accidentally fall down and end up in a Final Destination type of tragedy. If that happened, then this 1 million would be too much of a waste. As for the other shops, they were still the same. There were a lot of awesome items in them, but unfortunately, he did not know what to buy for the time being. In order to keep an eye on the pitiful amount of funds he had, Ryudo decided to wait until he needed to buy something, so as to not leave it there to collect dust. This can be used? Just as Ryudo finished looking at the attributes in shop, he suddenly found that the title column seemed to have some changes. Previously, this area was a gray area, and clicking on it did not have any effect, but now it became white, and after clicking on it, a second page appeared. After clicking on this page, a title overview interface appeared, and the interface showed that there were 2 titles that could be equipped. Title 1. Extreme Young Master, Charm decreases by 1. Courage increases by 1. Title 2. Desperado, obtained after dying 3 times. Resurrection cost decreases by 20% after equipping. This title is not bad. Speaking of which, there is a way to obtain a title through this method. After seeing the sudden appearance of the second title, Ryudo was suddenly overjoyed. Chapter 48. Things like titles were somewhat useless in Ryudo's eyes. After all, the only title he had, Extreme Young Master, was a double-edged sword. Although it increased courage, it decreased charm. Ryudo was born with LV2 courage. Excellent passerby. Increasing 1 level of courage didn't mean much, but dropping 1 level of charm was terrible. After taking off this title and changing it to Desperado, Ryudo's attributes changed. The original LV3 courage, Professional Expert, became LV2 courage. Excellent passerby. The original LV1 charm, Worldly Scum, became LV2 charm. Excellent passerby. Like I said, this is the attribute that I should have. Seeing that his charm returned to normal, Ryudo's face showed a happy smile. The new Desperado title was useful, but it only saved him 200,000 every time he died. Compared to the title that increased attributes, it was worlds apart. But the good thing about this title was that it didn't have any side effects. Even if it was a blank title, it was better than the Extreme Young Master title that had negative effects. After all, Ryudo Kiryu was originally quite handsome, and his temperament after rebirth wasn't as bad as before. If this kind of handsome guy was still called Worldly Scum, it would be too disgusting. So, originally, Ryudo's charm should be at the level of innate level 2, but because of the title reduction, it was suppressed to the level of Scum. The difference between innate level 2 and innate level 1 was not small. Innate level 2 only needed to add 3 attributes to max it out. The cost was 5 million, 50 million, 500 million. Innate level 1 needed to add 4 attributes to max it out. The cost was 5 million, 50 million, 500 million, 5 billion. So, innate level 1 and innate level 2, this was a difference of 10 times the cost. The final level was a difference of 5 billion yen. It was a headache just thinking about it. Although level 2 charm was quite good, in Ryudo's eyes, it was far from enough. Very good. If that's the case, then let's continue. I'll soar into the sky. Under Ryudo's shouts that resounded through the rooftop, he suddenly clicked on the plus symbol next to the charm attribute. Upgrading from LV2 charm to LV3 charm requires 5 million renminbi. Confirm payment? Of course. The moment he reached out and tapped on the word confirm, Ryudo was valiant and high-spirited, as if he had returned to being a land immortal. Along with the faint light, Ryudo's attributes changed again. As it turned out, the improvement from LV2, excellent passerby, to LV3, professional expert, was quite huge. Although his face was still the same, and he was still the same person, the effect of the increase in charm was immediate. When Ryudo went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, he was pleasantly surprised to find that the face in the mirror had become more pleasing to the eye. The originally very cheap and low-quality dyed yellow fur looked like the golden fur of a Super Saiyan. The ferocious eyebrows exuded a unique, masculine aura. The originally handsome facial features became even more perfect, enough to captivate thousands of girls. Of course, Ryudo's appearance did not change, only the feeling he gave people changed. The attribute charm. Sometimes it was difficult to simply use handsome or beautiful to describe it. This was a rather complicated feeling, one that went beyond superficial external things like handsomeness and beauty. This feeling was not so obvious when looking at the portrait in the game, but if changed to the real world, it was a lot more obvious. Good Lord, this is the charm of a professional expert. It can actually bring such a powerful affinity effect. After continuously jumping from LV1 to LV3, Ryudo finally understood how strong this attribute was. If he entered the school with this LV3 charm attribute, the result would definitely not be the kind of scene where people would avoid him. After all, this level of charm had already reached the level of a celebrity. It belonged to a true professional, the kind that had their own halo. No matter what they did, there would be people helping them unconditionally. Of course, the power of charm was not limited to this. The higher it went, the more terrifying it would become. Originally, in this game, there were two girls with the most powerful personal halo. They were the peak of the charm attribute. They had the LV5 charm, extreme Superman level of monsters. One of them was the big boss Tenmuayam. That girl's charm was so high that one look at her could make people want to hang themselves for her. Together with the same level of wisdom, she could even casually brainwash people for fun. She was simply an inhuman monster. And the second one was the game's second female lead that Ryudo was going to meet not long later, Yunyen Tsukimi. Although Yunyen wasn't as demonic as Yongji, she was also naturally brimming with charm. As long as that big miss opened her mouth, the entire school would do anything for her, without any complaints. So now, although Ryudo's LV3 charm was enough to deal with normal people, in front of Yunyen, there was probably no way to fight back. It was better to leave her for last. Just like this, Ryudo was immersed in his charm while waiting for the time to pass. Ring, 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 ring. 2 hours later, the bell that represented the arrival of the afternoon class rang throughout the school. The students of each grade also left the classroom with smiles on their faces as they walked toward their respective activity departments. Although Dori First High was a top high school, there were still many activities inside. Football department, basketball department, choir department, biology department, portrait department, archery department, light music department, drama department, boxing department. He read them all out like he was reading the names of dishes. Okay, let's go. At this time, Ryudo, who was standing on the rooftop of the teaching building, stretched and walked towards his first destination. In the short term, Ryudo's goal was still to find some reliable companions. And the person he chose as his first companion was the school hunk of the healing faculty, Sensible Goro, who was currently studying in class 3A. When Ryudo arrived at Sensible Goro's basketball department, he just happened to see a figure who was shooting a beautiful three-pointer amidst the screams of many female students. Just like the portrait in the game, Sensible Goro was a very handsome man. His appearance was handsome but not feminine, and his muscles were just right, not bulging, not making people feel that he was thin. Coupled with the gentle smile that always hung on his face, it was no wonder that he was always surrounded by many admirers. However, Ryudo knew this guy's big secret, and until now, no one in this world knew the secret. And this big secret was that this handsome healer, the school hunk who was adored by thousands of girls, was actually an incurable Chunibu patient. Chapter 49. From a long time ago, Sensible Goro became aware of a very important fact. I, Sensible Goro, am not an ordinary person, but the legendary detective, the reincarnation of Sherlock Holmes. My left eye sees through everything in the world. My right eye sees through the mysteries of the mortal world. Mortals are ignorant. They will only marvel at my handsome appearance that is like that of the sun god, but they will not be able to see my most precious essence. As a result, today's Kojigaro was also fighting with those sinful beasts. Figures flashed in front of his eyes. The group of sinful beasts tried to take the core of truth from the great detective's hands. But how is that possible? Sensible dodged and moved forward with a charming smile at the corner of his mouth. I am the greatest detective, Sherlock Holmes too. Back off. Beasts. After Sensible dodged the beasts, he suddenly jumped up, and the core of truth in his hand cut through the sky. It completely tore apart the grid made of sin. Good shot. A three-pointer. Sir Sensible is amazing. Just as Mingji landed on the ground, the group of girls surrounding the basketball court let out joyful shouts. If it was someone else, they would be very happy to get the support of so many young girls. Ha ha ha. Thank you for your support. Thank you very much. After landing on the ground, Mingji waved at the group of female fans in a friendly manner. The smile on his face was still as perfect as ever. However, no one noticed that there was no trace of a smile in his eyes. Boredom, ignorance, and pointlessness. These are the attitudes that the insignificant people around me should have. Whenever Sensible was surrounded by this group of fans and shouted around him, he had the idea of taking out a crutch and hitting each of them on the head. This world was not interesting for Sensible. After all, he knew that he was a hopeless patient with Chinibu syndrome. That's right, he was a Chinibu. Wise was well aware of this. But so what? I think, therefore I am. What I think exists, exists. I am Holmes II, and Holmes II is me. No matter what, this thought had always been incomparably firm in his heart. But in reality, Sensible didn't dare to reveal his romantic side to the people around him, because he was burdened with the expectations of his family. Wulong, as a member of the Sensible family, you must become a man who can shoulder everyone's expectations. Do you understand? Ever since he was very young, his father, who was the chief police officer, had been reminding him like this. My true self is a serious Chinibu. Therefore, such a person would not be accepted by this society. Sensible naturally knew this very well. He could be the proud son of the chief of police, the most popular guy in school, the rising star of the basketball club. But he couldn't be Sherlock Holmes II. Therefore, Sensible could only retrieve himself on the internet. As long as he turned on the computer and picked up the keyboard, he was the omnipotent cyber detective Sherlock Holmes II. In the real world, he could only play the role of a clown who was responsible for making people laugh. It doesn't matter. Anyway, no one understands my world. I'll just muddle along like this. With this sense of decadence, Sensible picked up the basketball and dribbled all the way. He wanted to end this round of confrontation with a handsome three-step layup. Yeah, but at this moment there was a sudden exclamation from the female fans watching from the side. This was obviously not because of the upcoming handsome scene, but because of an unexpected incident. What? Before Sensible could react, a figure in a school uniform suddenly appeared in the air in front of him. The people who played basketball in the basketball club would never wear a school uniform. Then this guy who suddenly appeared is Pa. Following a crisp sound, the man who suddenly appeared stretched out his hand in midair and easily swatted the ball that Mingji had just let go of. Block. This was the term generally used to describe what just happened on the basketball court. However, the person who did this was not any of the 10 players on the court, but a young man who should not be on the court. At this moment, everyone inside and outside the court was stunned. After all, they have played basketball for so many years, and it was the first time they encountered a scene where a spectator suddenly became interested and ran to the court to block a player's shot. Of course, in addition to the shock, some slightly knowledgeable people were also shocked by the figure's action because the guy really jumped too high. His feet seemed to have hit a spring as he easily jumped into the air and slapped the ball away. His palm even reached the height of the basket. This is a high school. How many high school students can jump so high? It's not like they are playing a slam dunk master. But no matter what, this kind of behavior of rushing into the field without saying a word to outsiders was obviously condemnable. Thus, a third-year senior from the basketball department angrily reached out to grab that person's arm and shouted, "Hey, what do you want to do?" He originally wanted to angrily rebuke, but in the next moment, the person turned his head. The signature dyed blonde hair, the signature ruffian handsomeness, the signature fierce eyebrows. Without a doubt, this uninvited guest was the man who created the miracle of Moses parting the sea at the school gate this morning, Ryuto Kiryu. When he realized that the person he grabbed was actually Ryuto, the basketball club senior suddenly opened his mouth, and the second half of his sentence was abruptly stopped. This, Ryuto Kiryu? Why is he here? What does he want to do? When everyone saw the person who rushed onto the court, they all had an expression of disbelief. Everyone knew that Ryuto Kiryu was definitely not a member of the basketball club. He couldn't even be a member of any activity club because the moment he joined a club, that club would be dissolved on the spot. But since they knew that the intruder was Ryuto Kiryu, no one dared to say anything to him. After all, according to the rumors, this man single-handedly defeated thousands of fully armed elites last night. He was a demon king with countless blood on his hands. But at this time, Sensible could clearly feel Ryuto's gaze. This guy is coming for me? Why is he coming for me? Did I offend him? The next moment, when Ryuto slowly walked towards Sensible, everyone around could not help but hold their breath. They did not even dare to breathe. Some of the more timid ones were even prepared to call the police. However, when the distance between the two of them was less than a meter, Long Do stuck his head out slightly. He used a mocking tone and said, "I didn't expect that a famous detective would play the role of a clown here. I'm extremely disappointed, my dear Sherlock Holmes too." Chapter 50. The distance between the two was extremely close, and Ryuto's voice wasn't very loud, so only Sensible could hear this sentence. Suddenly, his slightly numb gaze suddenly underwent a drastic change, as if he heard something that could change his worldview. How is this possible? Did he just call me Sherlock Holmes II? This title has only existed in Sensible's mind so far. He has never told anyone about his fantasy world. Even when he was an online detective, Sensible only used cyber detective as a pseudonym. He didn't dare to add the name of Sherlock Holmes for fear of profaning the sacred realm in his heart. Therefore, this was the first time in Sensible's life that he heard this word from someone else's mouth, and it was said to him. For the first time, Sensible asked in a somewhat sluggish tone, You are. Ryuto didn't answer his question, but instead he picked up the basketball from the ground. "Let's have a one-on-one, Sensible Goro." He picked up the basketball and let it hover in his hand, then said with a smile, "One-on-one? Basketball? Before the end of 3 rounds, you can ask me any questions to guess my identity. If you can guess it, I will tell you everything. Otherwise, I will never appear in front of you again." On the basketball court, surrounded by dozens of people, Ryuto challenged Sensible. 3 rounds, no problem. After looking at the unfamiliar face that he had seen a few times, he wisely nodded his head. Logically, he shouldn't respond to such a strange request. But Sensible was extremely curious about Ryuto's true identity and how he knew his true identity. Therefore, under Sensible's persuasion, the other members of the basketball department also retreated to the side and left the court to the 2 strange people, Sensible Goro and Ryuto Kiryu. The 2 of them actually wanted to have a one-on-one basketball? No, basketball was only a superficial dimension that ordinary people could see. In reality, the battle between the 2 of them was on another level. As Sensible took the ball to attack first, a huge British-style city appeared in front of his eyes. At this time, the basketball in his hand seemed to have become a crutch, and the jersey on his body had become a detective's uniform. With a pipe in his mouth, he walked through the streets and alleys. A mystery was looming before Holmes, too, and he had never been so eager to solve it. Accordingly, Judicious moved his leather-shod feet swiftly forward and stepped upon the cobblestone street. A dark figure appeared in an alley not far away. The dark figure smiled and said, "Sherlock Holmes, too, ask away. What's the first question?" "You're Ryudo Kirio, but you're also not Ryudo Kirio. You're like me, the reincarnation of some important person?" Sensible's voice was very low, obviously not wanting the surrounding crowd to hear. "That's right, score." Swish. With a clear sound, Sensible's basketball smoothly entered the net. What a hollow ball. In the second round, Ryudo held the ball, and the air around the alley became strange. But even so, Sensible continued to ask, "You and I exist in the same era. You're proficient in various criminal techniques, the head of the world's criminal organization, and like to trample on the law. Your name is James Moriarty, right?" When a reincarnated person who knew his true identity appeared, Sensible quickly thought of this name. There was no doubt that Ryudo's true identity was related to him. There were not many characters related to Sherlock Holmes, and even fewer with such obvious evil aura. And James Moriarty, also known as Professor Moriarty, was the #1 enemy of the great detective Sherlock Holmes. This inference was reasonable. However, the dark figure shook his head and smiled. "I do exist in the same era as you. I'm a romantic individualist, and I occasionally cross the boundary of the law. But I only act against the rich and corrupt upper class. Don't confuse me with Moriarty." Boom. At the same time, in the real world, Ryudo leaped into the air and smashed the ball directly into the basket with his right hand. A one-handed tomahawk dunk? What kind of monster is this? Seeing Ryudo slam Sensible away as if he had eaten spinach, the surrounding basketball team members were numb. They just wanted to kneel down and shout, "Sakuragi Hanamichi, please stop your magic." In fact, from the way Ryudo dribbled the ball, it could be seen that this guy was a complete layman. He did not have any skills. But it did not matter. He had the physical ability of level 3 physique, professional expert. With this physical fitness, dunking a basketball was 100 times easier than shooting a ball. As Sensible picked up the ball again, the third round of the final round began. However, this Sherlock Holmes II seemed to be trapped in a fog and did not dare to take a step forward. Who is it? Someone from the same era as Sherlock Holmes, a romantic individualist with a hobby of attacking the upper class. In fact, the information given by the dark figure was not little. It was enough for Sensible to make a certain degree of analysis and inference. But after all, there was only one round left. If he answered wrong, Sensible would be completely defeated, so he could not rush for results. From the previous description, Ryudo's true identity seemed to be both good and evil, and was in the middle of a moral gap. He was neither a good person nor a bad person in the traditional sense. He would only make a move against the rich and heartless, decaying upper echelons, as if he was committed to building this world into his own ideal. If there was a strong enemy in front of him, even if it was an unshakable existence, this person would use all kinds of methods to pry it away. There was no doubt that from the perspective of the entire society, he was an evil character. But this person was evil, charming, and also very principled. It seemed that he liked beautiful women. Could it be? It's him? Just as the dark figure was about to attack him, a familiar name suddenly flashed in Sensible's mind. At the last moment, he jumped up and threw the core of truth in his hand into the basket that represented the truth. At the same time, Sensible shouted the name that represented Ryudo's true identity. "You are the strange thief gentleman Yasin Robin." The ball went in. As the core of truth fell into the basket, Sensible's last shout that resounded throughout the stadium also reached everyone's ears. "Smart, correct, my dear Sherlock Holmes II." Under the confused gaze of the crowd, Ryudo smiled and took off a non-existent hat from his head. He did a dashing hat salute to Sherlock Holmes in the illusory world. Chapter 51. P.S. Chapters 49 and 50 were overturned and rewritten due to poor reviews. Those who read them yesterday can go back and read them again. Sorry, I won't do any more work. Ryudo Kiryu, the future second-generation leader of the Rulon Group, what exactly do you want to discuss with me? Not long after, when Ryudo and Sensible came to a corner of the school where no one was around, the latter put his hands in his pockets and asked in an expectant tone. Without a doubt, Sensible was looking forward to what Ryudo could say that would motivate him and break this silent world. But of course, Ryudo didn't disappoint and directly told him his goal. Kamiyoshi and Tenma Group, you should know what these two names mean. Of course I know, the behemoth that rules both the black and the white. Sensible's most outstanding point was his insight and intelligence-gathering ability. Plus, the sea of the internet gave the young detective enough space to explore, so he naturally knew much more than ordinary people. Kamiyoshi, needless to say, as a large family that assisted the Shinto religion, they had a complicated relationship with the emperor and had great political influence. This family was not only the emperor's relative in the true sense, but they also had the privilege of being a god. In fact, whether it was politicians, the self-defense forces, or the police, they all had to listen to their orders, or they could be eliminated for disrespecting the gods. This kind of thing happened from time to time in history, and the Tenma Group was a mega-corporation that rose a few decades ago. On the surface, they provided security, banking, and legal services for corporate giants, but in reality, they were merchants of death who sold weapons. As a military giant, they could be seen in the military conflicts of various continents. With the latest development of technology and the endless support of the company's inorganic capital, the tentacles of this dark military empire had already extended to every corner of Nippon. From the information Mingji had gathered, these two behemoths were truly existences that could cover the sky with one hand. As long as one lived in this island country, it was impossible to be their enemy, just like no one would be the enemy of the sky above their head. But Ryudo said casually, I want to deal with them. It was a simple sentence, but it was so moving. Deal with them. Deal with this decaying country. Deal with the darkness that shrouded the city. Sensible had thought of doing this countless times before, but he didn't dare. That's right, Sensible didn't dare. He was terrified. After knowing how deep the darkness of this country was, he chose to escape. But at this time, Ryudo stood in front of this deserter and openly stated his goal. From Longdo's point of view, he had no choice but to do so. Tenma Group didn't want him to live, and Kamiyoshi wanted him to stay away from his love. Could he not to fight in this situation? If he didn't fight, then there would be nothing left. But from Sensible's perspective, this extreme Dao young master was like a determined revolutionary, fighting for his ideals and for the world. Unknowingly, Ryudo seemed to grow a pair of wings behind him, and an angel-like halo appeared on his head. Of course, there was no such thing. Sensible's Chinibi disease was causing hallucinations. After taking a deep breath, Sensible asked seriously, it's easy to say. What do you plan to do? I'll develop my Ryu group into a sufficiently large organization. Then, I'll take advantage of the situation between the Kenzaki family and the Tenma Group and lure them into war so that I can benefit from it. Ryudo answered quickly, because this was the answer he had thought of long ago. After all, he was very clear about what would happen in this world in the future. He didn't even need to lure them. Next, these two groups would experience a series of open and hidden struggles. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. With Ryudo's understanding of the two forces and the future world, he could let the Rulon Group deal with the two sides while constantly strengthening himself. When the war between the two behemoths reached its peak 2 years later, the Rulon Group could directly backstab the two forces and directly destroy them at the same time. But the premise of this was that the fisherman also had to have the strength to kill the enemy. In order to achieve this goal, I need your help, Holmes too. After explaining the general plan to Sensible, Ryudo generously extended his hand. Crazy, what a crazy man. Hearing that, Mingji sighed. Then, he held that hand. Indeed, Ryudo was a madman, but Sensible was no better. There was a fire in his heart, a fire that wanted to light up the darkness. This fire was on the verge of extinguishing, but because of today's sudden invitation, it was reignited. In this way, the future famous detective Sensible Garo became Ryudo's partner and a torch for him to fight against the darkness. After both sides understood each other's meaning, the following conversation was easier to unfold. Ryudo, in fact, as the future second generation of the Rulon group, I can understand why you want to deal with the officials, but where did the Heavenly Eye group come from? Not long ago, the Heavenly Eye group planted a mole around me. They wanted to take over the Rulon group after getting rid of me. I suspect that my father's imprisonment was also their doing. I see. In recent years, there have been strange changes of leaders within many extreme groups. Could it be that the Heavenly Eye group is also behind it? It's possible. If that's the case, those guys' hands are too long. It feels like they're everywhere. Indeed, it's not impossible for them to throw a few mercenaries from the sky and kill the two of us directly. Ha ha ha. This is really impossible. Of course, this is the Dory number 1 high school. I'm just joking. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Before Sensible smiled and said, I'm just joking, how can I work in the school? A gust of wind had already rolled up in the sky. When Ryudo and Sensible looked up with an unbelievable expression, they saw a white helicopter suddenly flew out from behind the wall not far away. It wasn't a joke, nor was it Sensible's illusion, but a real helicopter. Moreover, there was a huge eye pattern on the side of the helicopter. Behind the eye pattern, there was a map of the Earth as if indicating that this Heavenly Eye was monitoring every movement in the world. The most terrifying thing was that the cabin door of the helicopter had slowly opened, and a few men in green mercenary clothes also revealed their bodies from there. Chapter 52. No, it can't be that strange, right? Sensible has a crow's mouth attribute. When the Augusta Westland AW-101 helicopter quickly flew in their direction, Ryudo couldn't help but have goosebumps. What a joke! This is Yodo, inside the first high school in the bustling area. How was it possible for someone to fly a helicopter into the school so brazenly? Did they apply for the flight route? What are the flight management and law enforcement doing? However, compared to the helicopter that really appeared, what made Ryudo's scalp tingle was the 3 men standing at the cabin door, ready to jump at any time. The 3 of them were all wearing emerald green field suits, and they didn't carry anything on their back. They looked like they were going to come out with light equipment. But when the helicopter just descended to a height of about 100 meters, they didn't hesitate to jump down. They landed in the direction of Ryudo and Sensible. It's impossible to deploy a parachute at this height. They are doing. It's okay. Just when Ryudo was wondering if the 3 of them were going to perform a suicide show, he saw that the 3 of them were holding a rapid descent rope made of unknown material. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With the help of the rope, the 3 of them successfully crossed the height of 100 meters in the blink of an eye. They landed in a triangle around Ryudo and Sensible and directly surrounded them. After landing on the ground, Ryudo could see the appearance of the 3 people. The tough face with various scars visible to the naked eye, the sturdy and flexible body was filled with a calm temperament that could only be cultivated after experiencing the battlefield. There was no doubt that the 3 guys in field suits weren't military fans or field combat enthusiasts, but mercenaries that returned from somewhere. It's Tenmu Ayam. That woman is planning to make a move on me. So soon? And it's in a school. In an instant, only such a curse-like name appeared in Ryudo's mind. In the entire Tokyo, the only force that could so brazenly mobilize helicopters and mercenaries to Dori First High School was probably the Heavenly Eye group. They had all kinds of special channels and means, and they could carry out some very exaggerated battle plans within the city without restraint. Even the government couldn't do anything about them. In fact, Ryudo expected that Ayam would find trouble with him. After all, he completely destroyed Ayam's plan the night before yesterday. Last night, he also cleared out Ayam's pawns in the Rulon group. After this, Ayam's plan to control the Rulon group was completely ruined. It would be strange if she didn't find trouble with him. That was why Long Do wanted to rope in his team as soon as possible, especially Mingji, who was proficient in network hacking, so that Mingji could monitor the Heavenly Eye Group's actions from all aspects. But it was too fast, it was really too fast. Ryudo just pulled Sensible into the team, and the people sent by IM had already arrived. That bastard didn't even bother to wait for him to leave the school for a few hours. Even if she was impatient, she shouldn't be this impatient. Suddenly, behind the three mercenaries, Ryudo seemed to be able to see an impatient face. Indeed, Tenmu IM was known for her impatience. She once had a glorious history, where she clearly arranged a meticulous murder plan, but because she suddenly felt bored, she directly threw a bomb to blow up the target and the entire building. This kind of impatience and freewheeling personality made her behavior unpredictable. Facing her was like facing an alien creature in human skin. However, just as Ryudo and Sensible stood back to back, nervously watching the three mercenaries, one of the oldest mercenaries slowly opened his mouth. He said in a stiff tone, "Ryudo Kiryu, my master invites you to come with us." The mercenary's tone was stiff, and the meaning behind his words was also stiff, leaving no room for negotiation. Although he said please, in reality, he meant come with me, as expected of Tenmu IM. So that's how it is. She doesn't intend to kill me here, but wants to bring me to the unrestrained Sky Tower, and use some methods to kill me? After understanding that these three mercenaries were ordered by IM to bring him back, Ryudo understood IM's meaning. The unrestrained Sky Tower was the headquarters of a Tenmu group and also the home of Tenmu IM, who was the commander. The reason for this name was that the Tenmu clan was the black-blooded successor of the legendary demon king of the Sixth Heaven, Oda Nobunaga. They were the descendants of the true demon king. In Buddhism, the Sixth Heaven was also known as the unrestrained sky. The heavens seized what he had transformed into for its own entertainment. Simply put, it was seizing other people's things for its own entertainment. It belonged to the most vile world of desires. Tenmu was similar to demon. As a descendant of the black-blooded successor of the demon king, Tenmu IM possessed malice far beyond human imagination. She loved to watch the miserable struggles of humans before they died. Under such circumstances, Long Do was well aware of the consequences if he was brought to the unfettered Sky Tower. He might as well just die and be done with it. Thinking of this, Ryudo decided to give it a try. Rather than being captured by IM as a toy, he might as well try to break out of the encirclement. After preparing himself, Ryudo quietly reached his hand into his pocket, preparing to pull out a pistol from his equipment slot. He observed carefully, perhaps because they were on a mission in the school. The three mercenaries did not carry any firearms. As long as he could pull out a pistol, he should be able to fight. But obviously, the quality of a professional was not something Ryudo could compare to. Even though it was a slight movement, it did not escape the eyes of the three battle-hardened mercenaries. Almost in the blink of an eye, the mercenary closest to Ryudo made his move. With a speed that did not match his tall and burly physique, he sprinted towards Ryudo with a speed comparable to a 100m sprinter. He reached out his hand and pressed it against Ryudo's hand. So fast. Ryudo was shocked and quickly tried to retreat, but another pair of ghostly arms had already grabbed his arm and pinned it behind his back. The close combat skills of a mercenary were not flashy, but effective. Almost in the blink of an eye, Ryudo felt pain in his arms, as if a few of his joints were about to be broken. Chapter 53. Good heavens, is this the true meaning of a professional? Just as his hands were tied behind his back, Ryudo couldn't make any effective resistance. Even if his physical fitness reached the level of a professional, his experience and skills were worlds apart from this group of mercenaries. Seeing that Ryudo was caught, Sensible on the side also squatted down and put on a look of not resisting. His actions at this time were undoubtedly correct. After all, the only target that I am invited was Ryudo. So, if Sensible made even half an offensive move at this time, his neck would be snapped in the next moment. Whoosh. When Ryudo was held down, a rope ladder was immediately thrown down from the helicopter, suspended in the sky. One of the mercenaries quickly tied Ryudo with a rope, carried him on his shoulder, and then climbed up the rope ladder. As for the other two mercenaries, they didn't even look at Ming-ji before they left. The meaning behind their actions was self-evident. Arrogance, absolute arrogance. Sensible was clearly a witness of this kidnapping, but the kidnappers didn't even bother to kill him, because they didn't receive instructions to eliminate the witnesses, and in I.M.'s view, there was no need to do so. Are you kidding me? I already sent a helicopter to the high school to kidnap people in broad daylight. Why would I care about a few witnesses? If you want to report to the police or the authorities, go ahead. It's meaningless anyway. After all, on this island, the Heavenly Eye Group was the uncrowned emperor. A mere police force was not even a dog in their eyes. There was no need to be afraid. Rumble, rumble, rumble. When Ming-ji saw the helicopter flying off into the distance, he was dumbfounded. From the appearance of the helicopter to Ryudo being taken away, the whole process passed at most 2 minutes. It was so fast that it was impossible to guard against, and there was no way to make any rational response. Damn. Ryudo, don't let anything happen to you. After clenching his teeth, Sensible quickly ran in the direction of the school gate. He knew that calling the police was meaningless, so Sensible wouldn't do such a stupid thing. However, as a cyber detective on the internet, all he could do was use his own network technology to think of ways to provide some help to Longdo. In addition, he had to immediately contact the Rulon group and let them know that their young master was now in a desperate situation. Yes, in a desperate situation. Ryudo has always been in a desperate situation. Ryudo has always been in a desperate situation. In these short few days, he even got used to this feeling. However, probably because his courage level had dropped when he was pulled onto the helicopter, Longdo couldn't help but feel agitated, and he couldn't think too carefully. So this is how the courage attribute is used. The moment he reacted, Ryudo immediately opened the system page and changed the title back to the original Extreme Young Master. As his courage attribute once again rose to LV3 Courage, Professional Expert, the influence of the murderous atmosphere in the surroundings suddenly disappeared. Few finally completely relaxed. The enhancement effect of courage could be said to be immediate. The narrow interior of the helicopter was as intimate as the toilet at home in the eyes of the dragon head. But even so, the current situation was not ordinary. There were a total of 4 mercenaries sitting in the internal cabin of the Augusta Westland AW-101. Including the pilot, there were a total of 5 people present. Although this group of people didn't say a word after boarding the plane, Longdo could feel the seriousness and vigilance in their hearts. Since they were arranged by Tenmu IM to carry out the secret mission of kidnapping Ryudo, then these people should be IM's direct subordinates, members of Combat Under the Heavens. In the game, Combat Under the Heavens was an elite army composed of 300 people. Almost all of the members came from the Middle East battlefield. They were all ruthless characters who crawled out from piles of corpses. With Ryudo's current strength, it was impossible to escape from the hands of Combat Under the Heavens. It was simply suicide. But if he was brought into the unrestrained Sky Tower, then there was a high probability that he would be met with a dead end. From a certain point of view, when Ryudo was dragged into the helicopter, his fate was already sealed. But even so, Ryudo was not discouraged because he was not afraid of death. After previously increasing his charm attribute, Ryudo's little treasury had about 45 million inch left. In other words, if the Dragon Sage did not intend to buy any items, this money would be enough for him to revive 8 times, giving him 8 chances to deal with this disaster. So now, the first thing to do was to observe, no matter the slightest clue or clue. Only by observing carefully enough could Ryudo find a ray of hope in this hopeless situation. In addition, he also had to see if there were any useful and cheap items to buy in the system's Krypton shopping mall. So when the helicopter flew towards the unrestrained Sky Tower, Ryudo quietly observed the situation of the mercenaries while constantly rummaging through the system's shopping mall. There were many things in the Krypton shopping mall, but considering the issue of cost-effectiveness, Ryudo could only look at some of the useful items and drool. For example, the rogue flying needle, which was very similar to Detective Conan's watch, could shoot an undetectable flying needle to knock out a person. It was a must-have item for killing people at home and traveling. Unfortunately, this flying needle required 1 million yen. It was so expensive that people couldn't bear to buy it. And in the face of so many enemies, knocking out one of them was not very meaningful. It was not as useful as the pistol in the equipment column. As for the other items, they were either useful but too expensive to buy, or cheap but useless. Ryudo was very confused. Wait, this is just as Ryudo was looking through the shopping mall page by page. He suddenly saw something similar to a contact lens. Item: Rogue Analysis Lens. Uses: a wonderful lens that can see the physical attributes of others, but not their clothes. It can be said to be a gentleman's item. See the physical attributes of others? Could it be that through this lens, he could know the attribute level of others? When he saw this description, Ryudo was suddenly interested. After all, in this situation, if he could see the attributes of others, it would be of great help to Ryudo. Chapter 54. Intellect, Physique, Courage, Insight, Charm. These 5 attributes basically contain the strength of a human's ability in all aspects. Through the system, Ryudo could see his own attributes, but there was no way to see the attributes of others. Even in the original game Red Album 2, No Survivors, there was no interface for the character's attributes. So until now, Ryudo could only use the information available in the game to judge the upper and lower limits of other people's abilities. But this kind of shallow judgment was definitely not as effective as the rogue analysis lens. If he could know the attributes of everyone around Ryudo, then he could infer a lot of things. For example, if a person wearing ordinary clothes walked towards him, but this guy's physique reached the level of a professional, then it was very likely that this person was an assassin who wanted to harm Ryudo. For example, if a seemingly honest person had extremely high intellect, then it was not difficult to determine that this person was actually a scheming person. For example, when dealing with a person with extremely high insight level, he had to pay attention to his words and actions to prevent him from seeing through his inner thoughts. In short, being able to see other people's attributes could provide considerable convenience in many aspects. It could allow Ryudo to make the correct judgment of a person in the fastest time. So this rogue analysis lens was definitely a very useful tool, but the price was actually 1 million. It was quite shocking. But even so, Ryudo quickly clicked on the purchase and put this tool into his inventory. After all, in his opinion, this tool could be said to be extremely cost-effective. Even if he used his life to exchange for it, it was still quite worth it. The moment he clicked on the purchase, a small transparent glass piece appeared in Ryudo's eye. Perhaps it was because his hands were tied up, but this time, the system was very considerate and helped Long Do equip the items where they should be. Zung. The moment the rogue analysis lens was put on his left eye, a familiar attribute list popped up beside the mercenary in front of Ryudo. Name: Andre Patu. Age: 38 attributes. Intelligence LV2, Constitution LV3, Courage LV3, Insight LV3, Charm LV1. This name, it sounded like a Russian name. As expected of an active mercenary, his overall attributes were really high. The mercenary that Ryudo was looking at, other than his charm being a bit pitiful, the other 4 attributes were very good. It could be said that he was a very good professional. He immediately turned to look at the other 3 players and found that they were from different countries, and their attributes were quite good. So that's how it is. This hooligan's analytical mirror can see one's name, age, and 5 stats, but nothing else. Although there wasn't a lot of information, it was still quite useful. After all, everyone's true identity and true ability could not be hidden from the eyes of this rogue analysis mirror. Who are you? Is there something wrong with your brain? Was his body strong? Was he brave enough? Was he observant? Was she charming? With just a glance, all the information was in Ryudo's eyes. It was like alien technology. Just as Ryudo was feeling excited about getting a new toy, the plane slowly began to descend. Rumble. Rumble with a deep roar, the plane landed smoothly. Ryudo was also led out of the cabin by the mercenaries. After leaving the cabin, the first thing that came into view was a huge bay, and many towering buildings could be seen in the distance. Surrounded by the sea view of Tokyo could be seen in the distance. Such a scene could only be seen in the center of Tokyo Bay. That's right, the headquarters of the Heavenly Eye Group, the Heavenly Eye Tower, was built on the artificial island in the middle of Tokyo Bay. The design of the Heavenly Eye Tower was a rather strange, abstract style. The main body was gradually connected by 6 building parts, and the shape that kept spiraling upward was even more straight to the sky. With a height of 666 meters, it looked like some kind of religious base. Of course, it was indeed some kind of religious base, but the god it worshipped was the legendary demon king of the 6th heaven, Oda Nobunaga. After leaving the helicopter, Ryudo was brought inside from the helipad of the tower. After walking through several long corridors, they came to a spacious study. The study was extremely spacious, and the decoration style inside was also very chaotic. The moment he entered, he didn't know where to start complaining. Ink watercolors hung on the walls, and the solemn European-style bookshelf was filled with various figurines with heads broken. There was a huge Doraemon engraved on the dark desk, and the gorgeous carpet had been sprayed all over by someone with spray paint. This was a typical example of how a patient with schizophrenia would ruin their room after they had money. Anyone who stepped into this study should know that the person they were dealing with was definitely not a normal person. But what was different from the style of this insane study was that the appearance of Eheim Amateru did not give off the feeling of a crazy person. In fact, Tenmu Ayam was a great beauty. If she chose to debut on the spot, she would have more than 1 billion fans tomorrow. When Ryudo came to the study, the tall figure was standing in front of the innermost floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the calm sea in the distance. Just the sight of her back was enough to drive men crazy. It was hard to imagine what kind of shock such a woman would bring when she turned around. However, in the next second, the woman turned her head and glanced at the distinguished guest she had invited, with her pair of the most special eyes in the world. At that moment, Ryudo felt like he was in an abyss, as if he had fallen into an ice cave. A natural fear like a mouse seeing a cat quickly spread through his body, and he couldn't even move a finger. Tenmu Ayam was very beautiful. She was indeed very beautiful. Her eyebrows were picturesque, and her dimples were like jade. Her facial features were as exquisite as if they had been measured inch by inch with a ruler. Her figure had the golden ratio, and her shiny black hair was slightly curled. It was tied into a graceful and luxurious ponytail that draped over her shoulders. Peerless beauty. If one had to describe Ayam's appearance, it could only be described with these 4 words. Her appearance might not be the most beautiful in the world, and her figure might not be the best in the world. But that peerless beauty was something no woman could compare to. No, it could be said that they didn't even have the qualifications to compete with her. But even if the woman standing not far away was indeed beautiful, it still couldn't stop Ryudo's body from trembling. Because when he saw the eyes that seemed to be connected to the bottom of the abyss and felt the inhuman temperament on her body, all the beauty on her body would immediately turn into a bone-chilling malice, making people want to commit suicide on the spot so that they wouldn't stay in the same world as this woman. Malice was malice. Deep malice, bottomless malice, malice that made people go crazy. But this didn't mean that Tenmu Ayam was a woman full of malice. To be precise, she was the physical existence of the word evil, a flower of evil that bloomed in black blood. Chapter 55. It could be said that the entire Red Album 2, No Survivors, was operated with Tenmu Ayam as the core. On the surface, it was a love game, but in fact, it was a survival game. The goal was to not be killed by Ayam. Behind the evil, there must be I am, Sama's, shadow. This was the player's evaluation of the witch, and when they called her, they had to add the honorific, Sama. There weren't many characters in the game that could make players call them honorifics from the bottom of their hearts. Only a few very charming characters had such an honor. Was I am charming? Of course, she was too charming. As the current head of the Tenma clan, she was the 37th generation direct descendant of Japan's greatest demon king, Oda Nobunaga. At the same time, she was the most terrifying monster in the world. The origin of the monster I am had to be traced back to nearly 500 years ago during the Warring States period. During that period of war, a tyrant who called himself the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven dragged the entire Japan into the abyss of fear. The Demon King of the Sixth Heaven was the name of the Demon King in religious culture. Nobunaga, as a human, called himself a demon. This kind of situation was quite rare in history. During his lifetime, Oda Nobunaga's atrocities represented by the burning of Mount Hai made the contemporary people hold a strong fear and reverence for him. Under the name of spreading martial arts throughout the world, the army continued to advance, and the people who died under Nobunaga's hands were piled up like a mountain. Thus, he really became a demon king, a true demon king in the truest sense. However, with a burst of shouts, "Advance, the enemy is at Hanoji," the rebel army raised the banner and surrounded the demon king in Hanoji. In historical records, the demon king of the Sixth Heaven and Hanoji turned into ashes in the flames of the Red Lotus. But history didn't record that the demon king laughed and shouted such a sentence before he died. "Burn, burn. My body may be destroyed, but my bloodline will be passed down for eternity, until this world turns into ashes." Although the demon king died, the black blood was still there. The surviving bloodline took the wealth that Nobunaga collected and fled far away, hiding the family in the darkness of history. 500 years. For nearly 500 years, this clan had been fighting for only one thing: carry on the wishes of the ancestors, turn this world into ashes. However, this was definitely not a great undertaking that could be completed overnight. In order to achieve this goal, every generation of patriarchs would do everything in their power to nurture their successors. Every generation of the clan leader of the Heavenly Eye clan would look for the most outstanding criminals to breed with. The vicious woman who poisoned hundreds of people to death, the serial killer who hid in the alleys, the bloody minister who planned the war. These were all the targets of the Heavenly Eye clan. The heavenly demon's black blood needed pitch-black malice to make it thicker, extracting the essence of evil from the outside to give birth to evil heirs, causing the descendants of this family to be further and further away from normal people. During this process, they often used all kinds of drug experiments, surgical modifications, hypnosis, brainwashing, and other methods to ensure that they could stimulate all the potential of the heir. Finally, the former patriarch would place the heirs that he had carefully nurtured in a large house that was built in imitation of Hanoji. He would let them kill each other, leaving only one behind. This kind of feeling was like raising a parasite. Only the parasite king, who could eat his siblings, would be the next patriarch who could make the black blood of the Heavenly Eye clan thicker. This absurd racial transformation had been carried out for as many as 36 generations. After nearly 500 years of racial modification, although Heavenly I Am had the outer shell of a normal person, her inner self was greatly different from a normal person. Ryudo had described her as such before. Dealing with her was like dealing with an alien in human skin. At this moment, standing in this study, Ryudo personally experienced how ridiculous an alien in human skin was. This guy can't be right. When Heavenly I Am stood in front of him alive, Ryudo's left eye's rogue's analytical lens quickly analyzed the data. However, looking at these numbers really made one's head hurt. After all, this world boss's stats were as follows. Name: Heavenly I Am. Age: 26 years old. Stats: Intelligence LV5, Constitution LV4, Courage LV5, Insight LV5, Charm LV5. Was there a bug in this world? How could such a monster be allowed to exist? Seeing Heavenly IIM stats that were almost maxed out, Ryudo really wanted to travel back in time and not play with her in this world. After all, the stats of LV5 Extreme Superman were extremely overpowered. In the game, it was not that there were no characters whose stats had reached the peak. For example, Cathouse Bunnyball should have LV5 Constitution, Tsukigami Yin should have LV5 Charm, and the later Kanzaki Colored Glaze should have LV5 Intelligence, and so on. However, this group of top talents only had a single stat that was off the charts. The other stats were sparse and normal. This was actually a normal situation. After all, how could there be a top military advisor, an invincible fighter, an extreme boss, a famous detective, and a super idol? Sigh, there really was such a person. She was right in front of him. King. Did you cheat, bastard? From Ryudo's point of view, IM's bullshit stats were completely modified by cheating. And to prevent others from saying that she cheated, she purposely didn't max out one of her stats in an attempt to cover up the fact that she cheated. Was that useful? Did you think that you were normal just because you didn't max out all your stats? Normal my ass. If you're not on the banned list tomorrow, I'll jump off the building. How is it? Are you done with your observation? Just as Ryudo was staring at IM in a daze, he heard a very special voice coming from the front and entering his ears. Youngji's voice was different from the clear and melodious voice of a woman. Youngji's voice was very deep, making it unforgettable for the rest of one's life. At the same time, it carried a strange magnetism. When he heard her voice, Ryudo quickly came back to his senses and revealed an awkward smile. No, this woman has the insight of a level 5 Extreme Superman. If she sees through me, I'll be done for. I'll just fool her for now. In order to cover up his gaffe, Ryudo awkwardly smiled and said, "Sorry, when I saw you, I was unconsciously addicted to your beauty, so I was a bit stunned for a moment." Huh. Instantly, Ryudo felt a chill down his spine. Although the latter half of the sentence was what he meant, it didn't come from his mouth. It was IM who casually added it. And when she added it, the corner of IM's mouth raised in a subtle arc. Her eyes also narrowed, giving people the feeling of a half-smile. Chapter 56. It had to be said that because of IM's beauty, when she showed this subtle expression, it was quite beautiful. But in the game, whenever IM showed this expression, someone would die. After understanding this, Ryudo asked with trepidation, What do you mean?" "What do I mean? I'm just stating the words you're going to use to brush me off. Aren't you going to use this as an excuse to cover up the fear when you see me?" The smile on IM's face grew bigger and bigger. She slowly walked out from behind the table and walked briskly toward Ryudo. Her slender white feet were wearing slender high heels. When the heels hit the carpet, there was no sound, but every step seemed to step on Ryudo's heart. Before Ryudo could react, IM moved her head closer and asked with excitement and joy, "You're 100% seeing me for the first time. Why do you feel so scared? What did you see just now?" IM was sure that it was Ryudo's first time seeing her. Even if many people in the underworld knew the name Tenmu IM, there were not many people who had actually seen her. At the same time, because of IM's strict management, it was impossible for her photos to appear on the internet and the media. But Ryudo obviously knew who she was, and he immediately showed a nervous expression as if he saw a ghost, which made IM quite curious. Thus, she walked towards Longdo, increasing the pressure she was exerting on him. For the first time, it was the first time Ryudo was so close to this woman. The two people's faces were almost close together. IM's perfect and flawless face was close in front of him. He could even smell her alluring aura of death as long as he breathed. However, the current situation caused Longdo to tremble uncontrollably. LV3 professional expert level of courage was enough for him to remain calm when he was kidnapped by a group of professional mercenaries. However, such psychological endurance was so fragile in front of IM. It was so fragile that it was like a cheap condom that could kill people at any time. "I beep, 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 beep. Your reply speed is too slow. We are now entering the punishment segment. Crack. Ryudo wanted to reply, but the moment he said, a crisp sound came from his left pinky. Ryudo looked down and saw that his little finger, which was originally straighter than a steel bar, had been bent at lightning speed, forming a 90-degree angle with his other 4 fingers. Aha! Intense pain. The intense pain of having his finger broken suddenly rushed to his brain, and Longdo almost couldn't help but shout out loud. But he didn't. Ryudo forced himself to endure the pain that was enough to make people faint with a little bit of backbone. He looked up at Ayam, who looked normal. Breaking the finger of a person she just met was as natural as breathing for Ayam. She didn't even look at Ryudo's hand. Then, the beauty smiled and said in a gentle tone, "From now on, you only have 5 seconds to answer each of my questions. If you exceed that time, I will break one of your fingers. Do you have any objections? If you do, just say it. I'm very generous. Everything can be discussed." Ayam's eyes seemed to reveal such a message, as if she didn't intend to force others at all. And a stopwatch appeared in her hand, ready to press the timer at any time. After knowing that this woman would never joke, Ryudo immediately replied, No objections." "Very good. First question. How did you know of my existence?" I know from being asked this question by Ayam." Ryudo's brain quickly worked. The time to think was only 5 seconds. If he exceeded that time, he would be tortured. Breaking his finger was not a joke. But how should he answer this question? Ryudo couldn't directly say that he was a transmigrator and that he knew her after playing Red Album 2, No Survivors. If he said that, it would be fine if Ayam didn't believe him. If she believed him, she would probably capture him on the spot and cut him up for research. But if he knew of her existence through other means, then what was this means? Shit, it's going to be 5 seconds. I have to answer quickly, otherwise, when he reacted, the stopwatch in Ayam's hand had reached 3 seconds. At the same time, the second snap came from Ryudo's left ring finger. This. Are you kidding me? Didn't we agree on 5 seconds? Ryudo bent down because of the intense pain. He took a deep breath and looked at Ayam, who quietly pressed the stopwatch. At this time, the stopwatch showed exactly 3 seconds. It wasn't even the agreed time. Then why did you break my finger? Under Longdo's silent gaze, Yongji giggled and said, I suddenly felt that 5 seconds is too long, so I changed it to 3 seconds. Don't you think it's a small change that's considerate? When Ayam let out a happy laugh, Ryudo realized that he was wrong. Originally, Ryudo always thought that Ayam was a reckless lunatic, just like in the game. But in reality, the Ayam in the real world was 1,000,000 times crazier than in the game. She was a universe-level lunatic. Under the stimulation of the intense pain, Ryudo took a few steps back and said as calmly as possible, You don't care how I found out about your existence. You just want to torture me, right? You actually found out. What a smart kid. Clap, clap. Like a mother who saw her child grow up, Ayam smiled and clapped her hands. Her action was very cute. The smile on her face was as kind as the reincarnation of the Holy Mother, but the chaos in her eyes increased. Damn it. Staying with her was like staying with a menopausal psychopathic gorilla with bipolar disorder. If this continues, I will be played to death by her. There's no other way. I can only fight to the death. In this situation, you will die no matter what, so you can only fight to the death. Do you want to take out some kind of weapon from somewhere to deal with me? Because you can't win with just your bare hands. Good luck. I'm looking forward to it. As if she saw through Ryudo's inner thoughts, Ayam once again expressed his thoughts with words. She even had a hopeful expression on her face. Are you kidding me, this guy? Bastard. Although Ayam saw through his thoughts again, Ryudo could only take out the pistol hidden in the system inventory and point the black muzzle at the woman. Chapter 57. He didn't know if it was because of Ayam's absolute confidence or for some other reason. Now there were only the two of them in this spacious study room. There was not even a bodyguard, and the door of the study room had already been firmly closed. In other words, now it was a one-on-one contest between Ryudo and Ayame. Ayame's advantage was unquestionable. Her 5 attributes were as strong as an animal. There was absolutely no human in the world who could match her. But Ryudo's side was not absolutely without a chance of winning. After all, he had the unpredictable Krypton Fate reversal system. As the young man raised his right hand, a pitch-black pistol appeared in his hand, and the tip of the gun was pointed at Ayame's chest. Young-ji didn't have any weapons. Her tight clothes couldn't hide any weapons, unless it was magically conjured like Long-Do. Wow, amazing. How did you get the gun? Where did you hide it before? Then, when Ayame was pointed at by the gun, she opened her eyes like a naive child and curiously looked at the weapon that could take her life at any time. Although the gun was pointed at her, Ayame didn't panic at all. It was as if in her eyes, the weapon in Ryudo's hand that could take her life with a pull of a trigger was just a child's toy. Don't move or I will shoot. Okay, I won't move, and then? Under the influence of Ayame's ridicule, Ryudo took a deep breath and walked toward the window while inhaling. If he wanted to escape from here, he definitely couldn't go through the door. There must be mercenaries outside waiting for him. Generally, in this case, the easiest way to escape was to take a hostage. But holding Ayame hostage was no different from seeking death. Only someone with sulfuric acid in their brain would hold her hostage. So now, the only way left for Ryudo was to break the window. As long as he broke the window, he could get out. Although the unfettered sky tower was 666 meters tall, it was surrounded by a vast expanse of blue ocean. If he could jump out of the window, he might have a chance of survival. Of course, Ryudo also knew that jumping into the water from such a high place was not much different from landing on concrete. But even if there was only a 1% chance, he might as well try it. It was better than staying here and being played to death by Ayame. However, Ayame watched Ryudo walk step by step toward the window. She stood there motionlessly with a smile on her face. This strange attitude made Ryudo felt even more uneasy. After cautiously approaching the huge floor-to-ceiling window, Long-Do could see the sparkling sea in the distance, shining dazzlingly under the sunlight. There's a problem here. It seems that this window is not so easy to break out. Let's do it. After glancing at Ayame, Ryudo quickly stepped on the floor and his whole body slammed into the window like an arrow leaving the bow. Immediately after, a muffled dong sound came from the study, but it was obviously not the sound of glass breaking. Puffed. Ha 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 ha. Surrounded by Young-ji's demonic laughter, Long-Do, whose eyes were full of stars, climbed up from the ground in a sorry state. His face had a very uncomfortable expression. This is the first time I've seen someone use their body to hit a nano-level bulletproof glass that can't even be broken by a rocket launcher. You're really a comedian. Have you watched too many movies? Seeing Ryudo's comical figure bending down and gasping for air, Ayame mercilessly laughed at his stupid actions. Ryudo said without raising his head, "I can't help it. Who would have thought that your window is bang?" But just as Ryudo was halfway through his words, 3 sparks suddenly burst out from the bolt of the pistol in his hand. The firing pin quickly hit the bullet and detonated the gunpowder. 3 copper bullets shot out from the muzzle with an explosive wave and shot toward Tenmu Ayame's body. These 3 shots could be said to have been fired very suddenly. At this time, Ryudo bent down and leaned forward, covering his hand. So from Ayame's angle, she couldn't see the shooting at all. And the most important thing was that Ayame was laughing at Ryudo's ugly state just now. When people laugh at others, they generally don't have a brain. Even if Tenmu Ayame was an alien creature in human skin, she would probably follow this rule. Hit, you must hit. The moment he pulled the trigger, Long-Do prayed in his heart that this shot would hit its target. Judging from Ayame's attitude when he approached the window, Ryudo knew that there was a high probability that he wouldn't be able to break out of the window. So he quickly changed his strategy and prepared to use this stupid behavior as a cover to feed Ayame a few bullets. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible to hit Ayame with such a small pistol. After all, this guy was a monster with extremely strong physical fitness and God-level insight. Dodging a few bullets was just child's play. If he wanted to hit her, he had to catch her off guard. Even if her physical fitness was strong, as long as a bullet hit her, she would definitely... The next second, Ryudo quickly raised his head and wanted to see where his bullet hit Ayam. But the truly terrifying thing happened. Under Ryudo's dumbfounded gaze, the woman still stood in the same place without moving. The smile on her face became even brighter, and there was no sign of being hit by the bullet. How is this possible? Although I aimed at her feet, it's impossible for 3 consecutive shots to not hit the same spot. Seeing Ryudo's incredulous expression, Ayam smiled and pointed at the carpet under her feet. Carpet. Why is she pointing? Hiss. No way. Ryudo looked at where the finger was pointing. He saw that in front of the carpet under the high heels, 3 shiny bullets actually fell to the ground. No, they didn't fall, they were absorbed. The heads of the 3 copper bullets seemed to be attracted by some kind of force as they were tightly stuck to the ground, and the tails even tilted up a little. Sorry, there is a special bullet absorption device on the floor of this room. Bullets made of copper, lead, steel, and other materials will be absorbed when they are shot out more than 1 meter. After explaining the strange situation, Ayam smiled and clapped her hands again. Kacha! Kacha! The next moment, hundreds of guns suddenly appeared from the ceiling of the study room. All kinds of muzzles of different shapes were all pointed at Ryudo's surroundings. And if you really want to threaten people, how can a small pistol be enough? You have to at least go this far, right? Yongji controlled hundreds of guns and pointed them at Long Do. She winked at him in a friendly manner, as if to tell Long Do to continue with his performance. She wanted to see what other tricks he had up his sleeve. Chapter 58. Ryudo had never imagined that there would be a day when he would be pointed at by so many guns at the same time. Pistols, rifles, double-barreled shotguns, submachine guns, light and heavy machine guns, carbines, sniper rifles, grenade launchers, and even a flintlock. F***CK your mother. Are you holding an arms expo here, you bastard? Others are calling out the dishes, but you are calling out the guns? At this very moment, the hundreds of guns pointed at Ryudo were all different. Many of them were even ancient models that were already in museums. From ancient times to modern times, there were even futuristic sci-fi weapons. These were the guns that Tenmu Ayam used to threaten others. They were also the products of evil that represented the entire evil history of mankind. The Tenmu group was a merchant of death that sold weapons. Weapons were specialized tools for killing, and also a symbol of the evil intentions of mankind. Naturally, Ayam was very familiar with the evil intentions of mankind. She was very fond of them. Of course, it was hard to say whether she liked the guns themselves or the feeling of pointing them at someone's nose. Just as Ryudo was feeling numb from the different guns, Ayam smiled and reminded him, "By the way, these guns are loaded with specially made reinforced glass bullets. You don't have to worry about the bullets not being able to be fired. It'll be fun to shoot." The floor of the room was indeed equipped with a device that could absorb all metal bullets, but the weapons on the ceiling were all made of reinforced glass bullets. It was perfect. The layout of the study could be said to perfectly demonstrate the vile character of Tenmu Ayam. Only I'm allowed to beat you up, not you. Heh, this is how willful this old lady is. If not for the fact that Ryudo was unable to retaliate, he really wanted to pick up the bullets on the floor and stuff them into Ayam's nostrils or any other orifice. It's over. I didn't expect her study to be so overboard. It seems that it's impossible to win against her here. Originally, when Ryudo was caught in the unrestrained Sky Pagoda, he thought about whether he could have a battle of wits with Ayam and try to get rid of this great demon. Now that he thought about it, his naive thinking was like eating peaches. If Tenmu Ayam could be dealt with so easily, the Kaneshiro clan, which held the most authority, would have already turned her into ashes. How could they have allowed her to run amok for so long? Therefore, no matter what, Ryudo was doomed today. Both he and Ayam knew this very well. Alright ho. How should I play with you next? But I'm not a demon. If you're willing to kneel down and kowtow to me, I might spare your life. Seeing Ryudo slowly lowering his head, Ayam became even more excited. She started to pant. What she loved the most was the expression of despair that humans would naturally reveal when faced with a hopeless situation. Especially when she saw those unlucky bastards kneeling on the ground and kowtowing with snot and tears. Every time she saw them, she was so excited that she almost spat out water. Everyone knew that Ryudo was doomed today, so he would definitely kneel on the ground and kowtow like everyone else, trying to beg for a chance to live. However, when Ryudo raised his head, what appeared in Ayam's eyes was not a face filled with despair. Although his face was filled with unwillingness and anger, there was not a trace of fear, let alone despair. At this time, Ryudo's fear had decreased to the lowest point, because he had thought through many things. The next moment, he shook his head and said in a tone that sounded like he was talking trash, "Tenmu Ayam, I've seen many scum, and bastards, but among this group of unrecyclable trash, you are without a doubt the one who deserves to die the most." W.A. What? This kid is scolding me? After being scolded like this, Ayam was stunned. It wasn't as if she hadn't seen people who gave up when they were forced to the brink of death. In the end, they died because they were addicted to talking. It wasn't as if she hadn't seen people before. But Ryudo obviously didn't look like he gave up. Instead, he seemed to have made up his mind, and he was more confident than before. And then, this strange change made Ayam couldn't help but retract the smile on her face, and even showed a faintly unhappy expression. "Then I swear here, if I don't throw you into the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish, I Ryudo Kiryu will write the 4 words upside down." "Oh, okay, fighting dragon Shungtong." Bang. With a loud bang, a specially strengthened glass bullet hit Ryudo's left knee. The strong impact made his left knee explode on the spot, and blood spilled all over the ground. He could barely hold the pistol and fell to the ground. When she saw Ryudo's painful expression, Ayam sneered. "So, Mr. Fighting Dragon Shungtong, how do you plan to throw me into the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish in this situation? I'm really curious, and I want to see it." Is it? Ha ha ha. You will see it in the not-too-distant future. The severe pain hit Ryudo's nerves, and there was no hope of victory in this dangerous situation. But in this case, Ryudo Kiryu laughed. His laughter showed a sense of heroism, and there was a sense of heroism that said, "I'm not afraid of death. I'm going to keep my innocence in the world." Crazy? Is this guy crazy? For the first time in her life, Ayam seemed to see a madman who was crazier than herself. Under her puzzled gaze, Ryudo slowly raised the gun. Although it couldn't be compared with the hundreds of guns that extended from the ceiling, this small pistol was also a weapon that could kill. However, Ayam sighed helplessly and smiled. "Is there something wrong with your brain? Didn't I say that this thing can't even touch me?" "It can't touch you, but it can touch me." Ha 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 ha. Before Ayam could react, Ryudo didn't hesitate to laugh, put the gun against his temple, and pulled the trigger. To be honest, this move was really beyond Ayam's expectation. "What's going on? You said you would throw me into the Tokyo Bay to feed the fish, and you took out a gun to commit suicide? This is not right, right? How can you say one thing and do another?" Just when Ryudo finally fell to the ground with a hole in his head, the expression on Ayam's face was unprecedentedly confused. From Ryudo's expression and attitude just now, he was not the kind of person who would give up survival, let alone commit suicide. But did he really give up? In Ayam's world, yes, but in Ryudo's world, this was not the case. Tenmu Etsuheim. Just you wait, we will meet again, but it won't be under this kind of situation. Before his consciousness finally disappeared, Ryudo took a deep look at the beautiful face, as if he wanted to engrave this face into the depths of his soul. Detected that the host is on the verge of death, initiating emergency rescue plan by spending 1 million to erase the fact of death. Beep 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 beep, erase successful. In the next moment, the surroundings of the dragon battle underwent a drastic change. Chapter 59. The messy and dangerous study room immediately disappeared. Ryudo was in a corner of the school where no one was around. Tenmu Iam's beautiful face that made people want to vomit also disappeared. In its place was Sensible Goro's handsome face that made people want to beat him up. Moreover, Ryudo and Sensible were still holding hands. The handsome guy in front of him had a look of excitement in his eyes. At this time, it should be about half an hour before Ryudo's Carefree Pagoda suicide show. He had just negotiated with Sensible and shook hands with him. Even the martial arts mercenary group sent by Iam didn't appear. Phew. I've never felt the school's atmosphere was so friendly. Sensing that he had finally left the devil's den, Ryudo couldn't help but take a deep breath. He felt his whole body was energized. At this time, Sensible asked with a smile, "Ryudo, actually, as the quasi-second generation of the Rulon group, I can understand why you want to deal with the government. But where did the Tenmu group come from? This, not long ago. Let's not talk about it. Let's run." Ryudo instinctively wanted to reply that not long ago, the Tenmu group planted a mole around him, or something like that. But his expression immediately changed. He grabbed Sensible's wrist and ran away. Say my ass leave first. If Ryudo remembered correctly, that deadly Augusta Westland AW-101 would immediately appear above his head. The three mercenaries would also immediately parachute down to kidnap him. With Ryudo's current strength, it was impossible for him to come out alive after being caught in the Carefree Pagoda. As long as he entered, he would die. No matter how many times he looked back, it would be meaningless. So the first thing to do now was to leave this place. This wasn't escaping, but a strategic shift. But when Ryudo pulled him away, Sensible naturally showed a confused expression. What the hell? Just a moment ago, we were still happily shaking hands and chatting to improve our relationship, and the next second, we suddenly started running. Could it be that running was also a way to improve their relationship? But wasn't he running a little too fast? This was the first time he had seen someone use a 100-meter sprint to cultivate a relationship. In the blink of an eye, the two of them rushed out from the corner of the school and came to the side of an old teaching building that was rarely used. Huff, 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 Ryudo? Don't ask questions. Listen to me first. Right now, the people from the Heavenly Eye Group are rushing over here to capture me. Hurry up and head over there to avoid being implicated. But before Sensible could finish his sentence, Ryudo quickly said to him and pointed in the direction of the school gate. What? Tianmu groups. It can't be, right? Just as Sensible bent over to catch his breath, Ryudo had already waved his hand and quickly ran into the old teaching building. Of course, if he really wanted to run, it was naturally the easiest to run with Sensible to the school area with a lot of people. Although the mercenaries of the World Dueling Force dared to chase into the school, they didn't dare to start a massacre here. After all, the nature of the situation was completely different. Then why did Ryudo run to the old teaching building when he knew he could retreat? The reason was simple. Running away wasn't Ryudo's style. He planned to launch a wave of furious counterattack here. After all, he had just been crazily abused by Iam and was forced to commit suicide in front of her. Right now, Ryudo's heart was also filled with anger. Heavenly Iam, after suffering so much from you, I'll take back some interest from your subordinates. Kacha. Ryudo, who was hiding in the corner of the old teaching building, took out his handgun from his equipment slot and pulled the safety. There were 3 enemies. Although they were all experienced mercenaries, they didn't have firearms. The most important thing was that the goal of the World Dueling Force mercenaries was to capture Ryudo alive, not kill Ryudo. In this case, the initiative was in Ryudo's hands. After all, if I can beat you to death, why don't you try beating me to death? In addition, this was Ryudo's school. He was more familiar with the place than outsiders. This was a huge advantage. After careful calculation, It was equivalent to having the right time, location, and people on his side. He also had a gun in his hand. There was no reason for him to not dare to fight with the 3 mercenaries. At the same time, the 3 mercenaries had already jumped off the plane and were quickly following the tracks he left behind. The target is aware. He is hiding in the old teaching building at 11 o'clock. Immediately begin to isolate the scene. After glancing at the old teaching building Ryudo was hiding in, the leading Russian mercenary, Andrei, spoke into the walkie-talkie hanging in his ear. The next moment, several men dressed in school janitorial uniforms immediately appeared and hung signs saying emergency renovation at the 4 entrances of the old teaching building. Moreover, they quickly used fences to block all the roads leading to the old teaching building to prevent students from entering the war zone. It was obvious that they were the janitors. This time, the old teaching building, where Longdo was located, could be said to have become a cage, an incomparably huge cage. But when the 3 mercenaries quickly went up the stairs, they didn't realize who the cage was set up for. However, just when the 3 wolves returned from the Middle East were hunting in a group, the husky, who was supposed to be the prey, was preparing to kill them. On the rooftop of the old teaching building, a beautiful girl wearing the uniform of the first high school was sitting on the 1-meter-tall railing, concentrating on the book in her hand. To be honest, this kind of action more or less tired of living. Although the old teaching building wasn't very tall, it was at least 6 stories high. The girl actually sat on the railing, and behind her was a 10-meter drop. If she leaned back, she would fall into the abyss. But the girl didn't care. She had a calm expression on her face, as if she was sitting on the stairs, reading a thick book with great interest on the railing that was only 1 step away from death. A light breeze blew on the girl's cheeks and blew up the brown hair on her forehead. Even if one were to judge her with the most picky eyes, this girl, named Yun Yen in the moon vision, was still a beauty, the kind that couldn't be picked out at all. She was delicate and sweet, more beautiful than peach blossoms. At first glance, she was a 9 out of 10 beauty, but she wasn't that otherworldly. But with the second and third glance, she became more and more beautiful. There was a unique sense of beauty that seemed to be able to penetrate into the soul of others. Apart from her moving appearance and her perfect figure that made her look too tall, short, fat, and thin, the most impressive thing about her was none other than Yun Yan's gentle, generous, and absolutely dignified words and actions. Chapter 60. Yun Yen Tsukuyumi was a 3rd-year student at Tori First High School. She was the daughter of the Tsukuyumi Financial Group, an international technology company. Her status was on par with a 2nd-year student Kanzaki colored glaze. However, she usually treated people with sincerity, gentleness, and generosity. She was so amiable to everyone without any airs, and always had a gentle smile on her face. She didn't have the delicateness and arrogance of a young lady, nor did she have the nobility and willfulness of a young lady. All she had was an elegance and calmness that no one could find fault with. She was as impeccable as the kid next door. A perfect young lady, a perfect woman. No one would dislike Yun Yen unless there was something wrong with that person's brain. Such an exaggerated perception was the general public's impression of Yun Yen in Tsukujigami. Without a doubt, such an evaluation could be said to be extremely high. It had already reached the clouds and was even about to ascend to the heavens. However, from Yun Yan's point of view, this was not what she saw in her eyes. I, Yun Yen Tsukujiri, am actually a very boring person. Yun Yen didn't know when she started to feel this way. As a true heaven's chosen daughter, she had been born with a charm that was beyond the reach of countless ordinary people. No one would dislike her, and no one would speak ill of her. No matter what she did, she would be praised. But such a convenient ability, she was tired of it. Yun Yen was soon tired of such a world, and she was also tired of such a person. She, who possessed a powerful charm that could make people like her no matter what she did, had instead lost her own path amidst everyone's praises. If Yun Yen wanted to do it, she could become a star, a president, a prime minister, or even a saint. However, She was not excited at all. Because this kind of achievement was not achieved by Yunyan's hard work, but by her natural strong charm. Could such an achievement still be called an achievement? At least not in Yunyan's opinion. At this time, Yunyan, who had avoided the noisy crowd, sat alone on the roof of the old teaching building and closed the book in her hand. Phew, so that's how it is. This novel writing method even monkeys can understand is really beneficial. After getting down from a railing, Yunyan put the thick book in her bag and stretched. When she stretched, her well-developed and alluring figure became particularly obvious. Fortunately, there were no creatures around. Otherwise, he would have a nosebleed on the spot. That's right, the book Yunyan was hiding here to read was something similar to a novel teaching, which was also one of her future dreams. The world of literature was a relatively fair world. No matter if the writer was ugly or beautiful, rich or poor, the words they wrote were all the same. No matter how charismatic I am, it won't make my novel better, right? And if I use a pen name to write, no one will know who I am, right? So, if I can write a good novel with a pen name, doesn't that mean I'm not a mediocre person who relies on his natural charm to make a living? With such thoughts in mind, Yunyan plunged into the world of novels. Although she hadn't written for others to read yet, she was still in the exploration stage. What is that? Just when Yunyan was considering if she should continue to improvise a few paragraphs, she suddenly saw the cleaners downstairs pulling up the fence and hanging up a sign. This old teaching building was only occasionally used for some side classes. No one would come here after school. Therefore, Yunyan was relieved to stay here and not be surrounded by friends. But something strange seemed to have happened today. Could it be that this building needs to be repaired or cleaned? If that's the case, then I'll leave first. I don't want to cause trouble for Mr. Cleaning. After nodding her head, Yunyan picked up her backpack and walked down the stairs with brisk steps. Of course, what Yunyan didn't expect was that the old teaching building she was in had become an existence similar to the Middle East battlefield. A quiet teaching building, a frightening battlefield. The two merged into one at this moment, making the surrounding space feel like it was torn apart. Now it was more than an hour after the afternoon classes ended, around 4:30. The afternoon sun was quite weak. It shone through the window into the corridor of the old teaching building, rendering the already dead atmosphere as desolate as the end of the world. In this situation, Ryudo, who was hiding in the corner of the third floor, closed his eyes and concentrated on listening to the movements around him. Tap, tap, tap. Soon after, extremely light footsteps gradually came up the stairs. The footsteps were very light. If Ryudo's ears were not pressed against the wall, he wouldn't have heard it. From another angle, it was not difficult to see a figure in a green combat suit slowly moving towards a corner where Ryudo was. The first one to reach here was the Russian mercenary who captured Ryudo before Andrei. At this time, he was trying to move as quietly as possible. At the same time, he was observing his feet, afraid that he would step on something small that would make a sound. At this time, the classrooms in the teaching building were all locked. There were no students around, which created a good opportunity for Andrei and the others to capture him. Just when he came to the corner near the bathroom on the third floor, Andrei suddenly narrowed his eyes and vaguely saw a figure hiding in the corner. Although most of the figure was hiding behind the wall, a corner of a boy's uniform was exposed. Needless to say, it was obvious who it was. He actually wanted to hide there. Too naive. Should I say, as expected of a kid. After observing the surrounding terrain, Andrei immediately crouched down and crawled forward in a nearly crawling posture. This special movement method guaranteed that he would not make a sound. Fortunately, the moment he rushed out, he caught the kid by surprise and caught him. 3, 2, 1. Move. When he came to the corner, less than half a meter away from the corner of the wall, Andrei suddenly rushed towards the corner, with the momentum of a tiger pouncing on a sheep. At this moment, he seemed to see Ryudo being quickly caught by him and falling to the ground crying for his parents. However, when Andrei pounced forward and hugged the target in the school uniform, he knew that he had been tricked. Because what appeared in Andrei's eyes was not a living target. It was a mannequin in a school uniform. Shit. Before the mercenary could quickly retreat, a figure had already descended from the sky and swung his elbow towards the back of Andrei's head. Chapter 61. Just as the iron elbow descended from the sky, Andrei finally realized where this guy was hiding. Indeed, Ryudo was hiding in the corner between the corridor and the bathroom. But he didn't stand on the ground. Instead, he grabbed onto the drainage pipe and climbed up the wall. When Andrei's attention was attracted by the dummy wearing Ryudo's clothes, Ryudo began to wait for an opportunity to strike. Wearing a short-sleeved shirt, he descended from a height of 3 meters and hit Andrei's head with his elbow. This strike was firm and firm. Even Ryudo's elbow felt some pain. Even the perpetrator felt such a huge recoil, not to mention Andrei, who was the victim of the attack. When the elbow landed on Andrei's head, he felt dizzy and saw stars. It was as if the scene in front of him was rapidly changing. The current Ryudo didn't learn any martial arts, nor did he have any combat experience. Therefore, his LVL-3 physique, professional expert physique, couldn't be fully utilized. But even so, his brute strength couldn't be faked, and this elbow strike almost knocked Andrei unconscious. But just as he was about to fall to the ground, Andrei fiercely bit the tip of his tongue and relied on the sharp pain to clear his mind. "I can't faint. If I do, I'll be finished." At this moment, Ryudo pulled out an ordinary dagger from his equipment slot and stabbed towards Andrei's back. But because he didn't have any experience in using weapons, this step wasn't quick enough. Therefore, Andrei decisively slammed backwards with all his might. The back of his head viciously slammed into Ryudo's face. This could be said to have fully displayed the rich combat experience of this seasoned mercenary. In a moment, Ryudo only felt a strong gust of wind, and a black shadow flashed by, and Andrei slammed into him. Although Ryudo's head moved at the last moment, and his nose wasn't broken, but he was still pounced on by Andrei. Once an expert made a move, it was obvious. The difference in experience between the two was like heaven and earth. The number of times Andrei fought was probably more than the number of times Ryudo ate. So naturally, he wouldn't be defeated so easily. After pinning Ryudo to the ground and taking away the dagger in his right hand, Andrei's eyes revealed a murderous glint. He sneered, "Stinky brat, don't tell me you think." Bang. But before Andrei could finish his sentence, a muffled gunshot sounded from his abdomen. Suddenly, a sinful bullet penetrated his skin, muscles, and deep into his organs, and stirred up the inside of his body. What's going on? He didn't have a gun in his hand? Andrei's mind was filled with questions the moment he was shot in the abdomen and fell backward. When he pinned Ryudo to the ground, Andrei was 100% sure that Ryudo's left hand was empty, and there was no place for him to hide a gun under his shirt and pants. Of course, the premise of this theory was that Ryudo didn't have an equipment slot that could allow him to take out his equipment at any time. Unfortunately, he did. At this moment, Long Do, who stood up from the ground, sighed. He turned around and ran towards the 4th floor without looking back. Originally, he didn't want to use a gun to finish him off, but now it was troublesome. In Ryudo's plan, he should be able to finish off the first enemy with an ambush, and there was no need to use a gun. On one hand, the gun would make noise and expose his position, and on the other hand, he didn't have a lot of bullets. When he took the pistol from Yamamoto, the number of bullets in the magazine wasn't full. There were only 4 bullets in the magazine. After killing Andrei with 1 shot, there were only 3 bullets left in the magazine, and this number could only be described as not optimistic. There were only 3 bullets, but there were still 2 enemies. With Ryudo's amateur level of gun skills, unless it was close range like before, he didn't have the confidence to take down 2 professional mercenaries with just 3 bullets. Just as Ryudo ran toward the 4th floor, the other 2 mercenaries quickly came to the location of the gunshot. It's hopeless, a 7.62mm bullet, shot at a very close range. The target should have a Black Star-type pistol. After seeing Andre lying on the ground with blood oozing out of his abdomen, one of the mercenaries quickly went over to check the wound, and then shook his head at the other mercenary. Since the target has a gun, then he should continue to fight back and won't run. If that's the case, we just need to move together. Although one of their teammates died on the spot, the two mercenaries didn't seem to be affected at all, and they calmly formed a small team and continued to chase upstairs. After all, they had seen too many situations like this on the battlefield. Moreover, knowing that the other party had firearms, the two mercenaries also took out some real weapons, such as the special ejecting dagger hidden in their trousers. The blade of this ejector dagger was first installed on the handle, and when needed, it could fly out at a speed of more than 60 kilometers per hour under the action of a spring. On special battlefields where firearms were inconvenient, this thing was the favorite of the mercenaries, and it was impossible to defend against within 10 meters. But for the current Ryudo, compared to the two mercenaries chasing downstairs, the most troublesome thing was the beautiful figure that suddenly appeared in front of him. Everything happened in an instant. When Ryudo just walked to the corridor on the 4th floor and was about to head to the 5th floor, a beautiful girl carrying a backpack leisurely walked down the stairs. Who is it? Instinctively, Ryudo immediately raised his gun, but he saw a familiar face. The moment he saw the face, Dragonhead was stunned. The long brown hair that was as soft as clouds, the beautiful face that exuded radiance like the Holy Mother, and the huge slime that almost broke through the binding of the clothes. Even in this world, there weren't many beauties of this level. The only one who possessed all of these characteristics was Yun Yen in Eugene. This was Dori First High School, and Yunyen Tsukini was a 3rd grade student in this school, so it was normal for her to be in the school at this time. But why? Why did this young lady come to this remote, old teaching building at this time? Just when Ryudo looked at Yunyen, as if he saw a ghost. She was also stunned for a moment. Then she looked at the black muzzle in Ryudo's hand. After a moment, Yunyen said with a smile, "Student, are you playing a gunfight game? But it's not too good to point a gun at others in this place." Before Yunyen could finish speaking, a green beret could be vaguely seen at the bottom of the stairs behind them. It was obvious that the two mercenaries had caught up to them. Chapter 62. Now, there was Yunyen blocking the way in front, and those two mercenaries blocking the way behind. Ryudo, who was stuck in the middle of the stairs, could only sigh helplessly. He quickly put away his pistol and rushed over to Yunyen and carried her up to the rooftop. This is not right. Everything happened too quickly. When Ryudo carried Yunyen in a princess carry, she instinctively wanted to press a button, but when she saw Ryudo's serious expression, she immediately stopped. Words can deceive people, so can expressions, but the nervousness of being in the middle of a battle is definitely not something that can be faked. Therefore, Yunyen immediately sensed that this boy did not want to do anything strange to her, but wanted to carry her to escape. Wait, isn't this Ryudo Kiryu? At this moment, Yunyen finally recalled the face that had attracted a lot of attention today, and the name that seemed to have been cursed. After all, in Dori No. 1 High School, Ryudo's fame was actually on par with Color Glaze, Yunyen, and other famous people, but they were all infamous. In Yunyen's impression, Ryudo Kiryu should be a big hoodlum with triangular eyes, aquiline nose, sharp chin, monkey cheeks, ferocious eyes, ferocious face, and yellow hair. However, the person who was carrying her and running forward with all his might was not such a person. Now Ryudo's face was solemn, showing off his handsome facial features incisively and vividly. Moreover, his eyebrows were filled with the valiant aura of a warrior on the battlefield. Originally, Ryudo's appearance was not bad, and now that his charm was at the level of LV2, excellent passerby, he naturally did not look annoying. Moreover, the environment that suddenly became tense provided Yunyen with a feeling similar to the suspension bridge effect, which made her feel a little excited all of a sudden. This feeling could it be? After realizing that her emotions were stirred up for the first time in a long time, Yunyen took a deep breath and whispered in Ryudo's ear, "Ryudo classmate, can you explain what is going on?" Yunyan's voice was gentle and melodious, especially when it sounded in his ear. He could feel the heat sweeping across his earlobe, making him feel like he was in the clouds. However, Long Do, who was on the run, was in no mood to enjoy the woman's gentleness. Instead, he hurriedly replied, "There are 2 kidnappers chasing after me. This teaching building has become a battlefield. You must leave immediately." As he spoke, he had already carried Yunyan to the stairs at the other end of the building. At the same time, the 2 mercenaries had already appeared at the staircase. Both parties were only separated by a few hundred meters of the corridor and looked at each other from afar. "Go down. Don't look back, and don't tell anyone about this." After putting Yunyan down at the stairs, Ryudo reminded her while quickly pointing at the road below, indicating that she should leave quickly, and he was ready to run up the stairs. "Wait, Ryudo classmate." But before the dragon head ran 2 steps, Yunyan suddenly reached out and grabbed his sleeve. This. Long Do was scared out of his wits because the 2 mercenaries were closing in on him at a speed visible to the naked eye. He could only continue to say seriously, "Miss, this is not a joke. Hurry. I know the 2 kidnappers are real, and you are really being chased, so you don't have to run. I can help you solve the problem." "What? You can help me solve the problem?" After hearing Yunyan's words, Ryudo's head couldn't help but have a big question mark. Although in the original work, Yunyan was also a miss of the same level as Colored Glaze, she didn't seem to have a guard like 16 Nights Dancing costume by her side. But at this moment, Yunyan quickly took out a small button switch from her pocket and pressed it without hesitation. After completing this action, the 2 mercenaries were already more than 50 meters away. They were about to pounce on the 2. "TSK, no way." Seeing that the other party was quickly rushing over, Ryudo quickly blocked Yunyan behind him, and he took out his pistol and pointed in the direction of the 2 people. In the long and narrow corridor, the conflict was about to break out. But in the next moment, something that Ryudo and the mercenaries didn't expect suddenly appeared. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Buzz, 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 buzz. Accompanied by a rapid buzzing sound, 2 multi-axis rotor miniature drones that were slightly larger than a football quickly appeared beside Yunyan, and the muzzle below was aimed at the mercenaries rushing over. What? Before the 2 mercenaries could react, a barrage of bullets had already blasted their bodies. For these 2 experienced mercenaries, if it was only the small pistol in Ryudo's hand, they were still confident that they could dodge it. But these 2 drones were different. In this small corridor, hundreds of bullets directly hit their bodies, and they fell to the ground on the spot. When Ryudo saw this scene, he was stunned. It wasn't until now that he remembered that in the Tsukudri Consortium, a multinational company famous for high-tech, the core field was all kinds of intelligent machinery. From automated mechanical arms, and other automated mechanical and electrical equipment, to mechanical birds, mechanical dogs, drones, intelligent butlers, and so on, this was the main business of the Tsukudri Consortium. For such a high-tech company, it was only natural that they would have extremely high standards for the security of their young Mississippi. Therefore, it wasn't that Yunyan didn't have bodyguards, but her bodyguards didn't need to be around at all times. They could fly over at any time to protect her. When she saw Ryudo's dumbfounded expression, Yunyan raised the remote control in her hand and explained with a smile, "Don't worry. The shots were all low-dose anesthetic bullets. They won't kill anyone probably." Although the words probably made people feel that it was quite unreliable, the mercenary kidnapping incident was unexpectedly solved. Oh my God, there were such special bodyguards around Yunyan. This was a scene that didn't appear in the original work. After glancing at the 2 real guys floating around Yunyan, Ryudo couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. If his action of rushing over to pick up Yunyan was deemed as an intentional assault, then the one who would be taking a bullet right now would probably be him. "Okay, Ryudo, since I helped you, then you should explain to me what is going on, right? I'm very, very interested in this." "Oh." At this time, Yunyan came to Ryudo in high spirits, waved her hand, and then showed him a crazy smile. Chapter 63. For the vast majority of people, the scene just now was obviously surreal. Who has ever been chased by kidnappers in school and fought with them with a gun? People who would answer, yes, should be rare. After all, this should only be seen in movies, TV series, novels, and manga. But if such a scene really appeared in front of the eyes of ordinary people, then they would be shocked to the point that their legs would go soft. Fear and confusion would quickly break through the mental limit, and they could only be confused like a headless fly. However, there were very few people who would be excited by this surreal scene. They would be excited to be trapped in a situation where they could die at any time. This kind of excitement would lead to a crazy increase in the amount of dopamine secretion in the brain, resulting in excitement and joy emotions. Very coincidentally, Yunyen in Tsukiji was such a person. After understanding that Ryudo was really being chased, Yunyen felt her heart beat so fast for the first time, and her face became red. Excited, so excited. Although on the surface Yunyen still maintained the demeanor of a young lady, her heart was already blooming with joy. It must be known that this kind of scene was not something that anyone could see, especially for Yunyen, who had been well protected since childhood. She was an ordinary girl who had never been kidnapped. Of course, Yunyen was not a person who simply pursued this kind of excitement. She was most concerned about the sudden surge of inspiration in her brain after sufficient stimulation. Inspiration like a spring. Suddenly, she wanted to take out a pen and write down the legendary scene in a book. Her desire to write was unprecedentedly high. As a future famous writer, self-proclaimed, Yunyen always thought that she needed a variety of experiences to enrich her experience, to be able to write a truly moving story. People who have never experienced a hail of bullets, can they write that kind of life on the battlefield? People who have never been kidnapped, can they write that kind of pain and helplessness? People who have never held hands with a girl, can they write that kind of blushing and heartbeat in love? Of course not. At least in Yunyen's view, it was not possible. At this moment, a huge inspiration suddenly gushed out from Yunyen's mind. Ryudo Kiryu was, without a doubt, a man with extraordinary experiences and a man who lived a different life from ordinary people. Being in the dark and walking on the tip of a knife, one's head could fall to the ground at any time. Death would be a worthy death. Corpses would be strewn on the streets or sink into the Gulf of Tokyo. However, it was precisely this sense of danger and excitement that made his life seem more realistic and could arouse the interest of readers. It was hard to say whether the reader's interest would be piqued, but Yunyen's interest was completely piqued. However, this kind of interest was not a bad thing for Ryudo. After all, Yunyen was a companion that he wanted to rope in, and she was also one of his dream lovers. That's right, I won't pretend anymore. I just want her body, Ryudo Kiryu. With such feelings, Ryudo roughly described his experience with the Heavenly Eye group. At the same time, he also took a look at Yunyen's stats. As expected, Yunyen's stats were quite exaggerated, although her 3 measurements were also exaggerated. Cough cough. Name: Yunyen Tsukimiki's age, 17 stats. Intelligence LV2, Constitution LV1, Courage LV3, Insight LV1, Charm LV5 born with extreme charm and professional level guts. This was the full picture of Miss Tsukimiki's stats. In the process of Ryudo's description, Yunyen looked rather calm, but the smile on her face became more and more obvious. I see. After hearing about Long Do's encounter, Yunyen suppressed her excitement and tried her best to say seriously, "You're being chased by people from the Heavenly Eye group. You're really unlucky." That's right. If it wasn't for your help, Yunyen, I would probably have to take some risks to solve it. Ryudo was actually quite surprised by Yunyen's help. After all, in the original Red Photo album too, No Survivors, Yunyen wasn't the kind of female lead that often involved fighting. Yunyen was the second female lead. In order to show the difference between her and the first female lead, the colored glaze, the plot for Yunyen was completely different from the colored glaze. Because Yunyen's dream was to become a writer every time the players met with her, it was in the library or bookstore. The things they discussed were also rather relaxed, youthful topics. In Yunyan's personal line, in order to let her experience the life of a civilian and obtain writing qualifications, the players took Yunyan, who had no social experience, away from home. It was commonly known as eloping. While the two avoided the pursuit of the Tsukudri Consortium, they experienced a journey from the east to the westernmost part of Japan. After many difficulties on the journey, Yunyan finally grew up, and the novels she wrote also had the power to be deeply rooted in people's hearts. In the end, they reached a happy ending. Compared to the colored glaze line, which often involved the survival of Japan and the confrontation between black and white, the Yunyan line was much smaller, more youthful, and more warm. This kind of personal line was more like a love drama in the traditional sense, rather than the urban love, adventure action, mystery, science fiction, historical drama in the colored glaze line. But this kind of description focused on youth also made the players not know as much about Yunyan as the colored glaze. What was Yunyan's daily life like? Was she threatened in any way? What was the conflict between the Tsukudri Consortium and the Tenma group that she belonged to? How was the conflict resolved in the end? And no matter at the end of the line, the game would enter the Ni Hanan Temple incident, which was the major event where Tenmu Ayam decided to turn the entire Japan into a sea of fire and destroy the country. This incident was the climax of the game. In the colored glaze line and the third female storyline, the protagonists were involved in the whole process, but only Yunyan did not participate in the story. She only vaguely mentioned a few words. Therefore, Ryudo's impression of Yunyan in Tsukudri was actually different from the first and third female protagonists. He would think that she was more civilian and less violent. However, Yunyan's next request subverted Ryudo's understanding of her. After straightening her expression, Yunyan asked in a serious tone, "Ryudo-san, actually, I have something to ask you. You don't have to be so polite. Yunyan, just say what you want. Then I'll say it directly. I want you." Puffed. That's too rash. Actually, I want you to be my research sample. Sorry, there seems to be something wrong with my ears or my head. Can you say it again in detail? After hearing Yunyan's words, Ryudo reached out to dig his ears and patted his head, as if suspecting that there was something wrong with his ears or his head. I hope you can be my research sample. I want to study your life, your past, present, and future experiences in order to write a novel that can shock people. Seeming to understand what Ryudo was surprised about, Yunyan expressed her thoughts in clearer words. Chapter 64. Words had the power to shock people's hearts. Anyone who had read Crystal Duckweed Rose, a Tanuki's Chronicles of Buddha, Yang A. Bing, Elves Are Not Creatures in a Pond, and other literary masterpieces would have felt the shock that went deep into their souls. However, such words were not something that ordinary people with ordinary experiences could write. Therefore, Yunyan's intention at this time was obvious. She wanted to observe Ryudo's past, present, and future life experience in order to write a real masterpiece. I plan to name this book with you as the protagonist, starting from the Tokyo villain. What do you think? When talking about her novel plan, Yunyan's eyes flashed brightly, as if there was an entire universe in her pupils. On the other hand, Longdo didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he replied, "That. How can I not be crushed? Can you leave me a whole corpse?" "I see. Then let's change it to Extreme Watchman." "No, I can't say the reason, but in short, this name won't do." "Then let's Extreme Lord, Breaking Extreme Path, Extreme Path Continent, The years I was a corpse collector in Tokyo Bay, stop. Don't think about the name. In short, you want to get inspiration for writing by observing me, right? But this will be dangerous. Are you sure you want to do this?" When Yunyan began to excitedly jump out book titles that were full of déjà vu, Ryudo reached out and stopped her. Although he planned to let Yunyan join his team, Ryudo only wanted her body, and he also wanted to use the power of the Tsukumori Consortium behind her. But if he wanted to let Yunyan observe him at close range, it would inevitably involve her in some dangerous moments, such as just now. But Yunyan shook her head and said firmly, "Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. And you saw it just now, I'm not a weak person." When Yunyan pressed a button, just now, the two drones flew over and buzzed. It could be seen that she wasn't trying to maintain her image, but that it was the truth. In that case, Ryudo agreed to Qin Yushan's request and became her observation specimen. Although this title didn't sound very nice, the things involved weren't complicated. Normally, Yunyan would at most chat with Ryudo from time to time, or record some of his life through the reconnaissance drone as material for her writing. On the other hand, Yunyan would pay Longdo half of the book's royalties as a standard fee, although Longdo didn't expect to get this money. After all, in Ryudo's opinion, Yunyan's writing skills were really weird. For the next 2 hours, Ryudo was dragged by Yunyan to the rooftop to enjoy the novel she wrote before. The two sat very close to each other while reading. Ryudo could smell the sweet fragrance around him at any time, and he could even see Yunyan's long eyelashes. However, even so, Ryudo's expression was still very stiff because the things written in the notebook in his hand really didn't know how to give a fair evaluation. In fact, Yunyan's academic performance was quite excellent, and her literary foundation was okay, but her brain circuit in writing was a bit strange. For example, in the novel, the female protagonist chose to buy silver jewelry from a silverware shop in order to make chocolate for her crush. She melted the silver and plated it on the chocolate, giving it a beautiful silver luster. Speaking of which, was this not murder? Similar strange brain circuits were everywhere in Yunyan's book. It was obviously a youth school romance novel, but suddenly, the next page appeared mutant and the ancient god Cthulhu. After that, the male and female protagonists were recognized as the strongest mutants in history. They sat on high-tech robots that appeared out of nowhere and started a battle with the ancient god Cthulhu. While fighting, they fell in love and dealt with as many as 7 or 8 romantic relationships. From time to time, there would be some family comedies. The most frightening thing was that all of the above descriptions appeared in just 10 pages of content. After reading Yunyan's novel, Ryudo's thought was, is this really something that a normal person can write? Even if I throw a cat to roll on the keyboard, it would be more logical. But in front of Yunyan, who was extremely excited because she found a soulmate, he still couldn't say such words to spoil the mood. Amidst this incomparable torment, 2 hours finally passed. The sky gradually darkened, and the Dory First High School activity time was about to end. By the way, I've actually been too embarrassed to show the content of these novels to anyone. It's great that Ryudo is here. See you tomorrow. When Yunyan was about to leave the old teaching building, she finally turned her head and smiled at Ryudo. There was a sense of relief in her tone. When he saw senior sister Yunyan smile, Longdo suddenly felt that his 2 hours of suffering were not in vain. At the very least, his relationship with this great beauty had become much closer. Well, next, he had to take care of some loose ends. After sending off Yunyan, Ryudo called Sensible to inform him that he was safe and that he was still alive. Then he called Narukai and the others in and let them take care of the aftermath. After all, in this old teaching building, there were 2 mercenaries and a corpse lying in the toilet waiting to be disposed of. Since these guys were in this line of work, they should have expected what would happen if they failed. Therefore, Ryudo was too lazy to deal with these trivial matters. Instead, he directly handed them over to his driver, Narukai Otani. If there were no accidents, they would be buried in the forest tonight and would never have a chance to see the light of day again. Of course, this was not the end, or rather, it was just the beginning. With Ryudo's understanding of Tenmuayam, she would not be discouraged by this small matter. Instead, she would continue to attack him fiercely. But in any case, as Ryudo returned to Kamishimachi in his black car, this incomparably magnificent day finally came to an end. How many things had happened today? Even Ryudo almost couldn't remember. So tired, bastard. Is going to school such a terrible thing in this world? As night fell, Ryudo laid on the bed in his room after a quick dinner. He looked like a salted fish that had exhausted its energy. "Young Master Ryudo, are you asleep?" Just when Ryudo was about to lie down and rest early, Consultant Fujiki's familiar voice sounded from behind the door. "Ah, I'm not asleep, what's the matter?" "Nothing big. It's just that the group leader wants to meet with you. He seems to have something to talk to you about." "Oh, then what?" "Group leader? Rulon Group leader Hitoshi Kazuma? My father? Want to meet with me?" When he heard this sudden news, Ryudo's face couldn't help but show a complicated expression. Chapter 65. For the current Rulon Group's leader, Kazuma Kirishima, Ryudo's feelings were somewhat complicated. In Red Album 2, no one survived. He stayed in prison the whole time, and he didn't even have a portrait. At most, he was just a passerby. But in this world, Kazuma was a living person, and he was the father of this body. The old saying said that blood is thicker than water, but although Ryudo's body was Kazuma's blood, his soul was not. Under such circumstances, if Long Do were to call a stranger father, it would be somewhat awkward. However, now that the blood father had appointed him to visit the prison, Ryudo couldn't choose not to go, so he could only go to the Tokyo nesting duck prison. So early in the morning of the next day, Ryudo happily skipped class and got into the car to go to the nesting duck prison. According to the original plan, today Ryudo should be looking for his last partner, Takayama Masato. But since his father had something to look for, then he should go and visit him. After all, he was the father of this body. Soon after, Ryudo came to the nesting duck prison located in the suburbs of Tokyo, which was also a place where people in the underworld were afraid to talk about. Some reports could be seen from many places, saying that the prison conditions in Japan were better than many places, which was indeed a fact. First of all, the 3 meals in the prison were guaranteed, and the inside was clean and tidy, safe and orderly, which could be said to be very thoughtful. But the members of the extreme path, who really squatted in there, knew that the prison in Japan destroyed people's spirit and caused indelible psychological damage. In this damn place, even looking at the guards will be punished. Looking up during the meal will be punished. Closing your eyes when you shouldn't be closing your eyes will be punished. Opening your eyes when you shouldn't be opening your eyes will still be punished. On the first day, I was asked to memorize the entire prison manual. It stipulated how my feet should be raised, how much angle should I raise my hand, and when I sleep, I can only lie on my side or face up. I can't lie face down, and I can't cover my face. Otherwise, I will be punished. In any case, it is very, very oppressive inside. Without the permission of the prison guards, you are not allowed to do anything other than breathe. The above description came from the personal experience of a senior of the Rulon Group who had been in the nesting duck prison for 5 years. At that time, his vivid descriptions and painful tone had left a deep impression on Ryudo. However, that team leader Tong Shinyima's sentence was not a short 5 years, but 6 times the sentence of 30 years. Because he was charged with multiple crimes, such as serious intentional injury, intentional homicide, and assault on the police, Ima had a high probability of being sentenced to death, but because of his good relationship with a lawyer, it was changed to 30 years in prison. But from a realistic point of view, 30 years of imprisonment was not much different from the death penalty. After all, many death row prisoners in Japan had been in prison for decades without being executed. In the end, they still died of old age. When Ryudo arrived at the heavily guarded prison, he filled out all the forms and waited for another hour before he was let through the door. The prison guards obviously did not welcome Ryudo's arrival, but after all, he was visiting according to the formal procedures, so they could only give permission. Wait here. After coldly leaving such a sentence, the guard stood next to him and stared at Ryudo with the eyes of a prisoner. From the appearance, Ryudo's dyed yellow hair did indeed look like a delinquent youth. In addition, he had a close blood relationship with the prison's big criminal, Tong Shinnyima, which naturally made the guards nervous. In this visiting room, separated by an iron window in the middle, not long after, the opposite door was slowly opened, and a tall figure walked in with steady steps. In his memory, Ryudo's father's face was actually a bit vague, but he vaguely remembered that his figure was very tall, giving people a feeling of indomitable spirit. But now in the prison, even if Ima was wearing a prison uniform and had a buzz cut, the expression on his face and the aura on his body were still the same as in his memory, and he walked with a straight back. A man should be like this, regardless of whether it was good or bad. Indomitable spirit. A dragon trapped in the shallows is still a dragon, and will not become a shrimp crawling because of this. You're here. Today seems to be Tuesday. Don't you have class? When the Rulon Group's team leader sat on the stool, facing his son through the iron window, his first sentence was unexpectedly this. For some reason, Yima gave Ryudo the feeling that he did not feel like he was in prison, but like he was in his daily work state, and suddenly saw his son appear in front of him. Huffed. So Ryudo could not help but laugh, and the austere atmosphere in the visiting room became a lot more lively. Sorry, today I slightly skipped class. You won't spank me, right? If there was no iron window in the middle, maybe I would do that. That's really comforting. For the first time I feel that prison is a good place. For a time, the father and son actually chatted like this, giving the feeling that they were chatting at home, completely ignoring the serious atmosphere in the prison and the surrounding guards. However, when he heard Ryudo's voice getting louder and louder, the guard who was responsible for monitoring him next to him could not help but say, "Hey, lower your voice, you can't make noise in prison." In an instant, Ryudo turned his head slightly and looked at the guard with a sharp gaze. The current Ryudo was not the ordinary person who just crossed over. In just 3 days, he confronted Tenmu Ayam, fought with the cat house, threw Sakata out of the second floor in public, killed the mercenaries with his own hands, and so on. After experiencing these big events that ordinary people could not imagine in their lifetime, his momentum has gradually become like a big boss, like a carp that leaped over the dragon gate. Therefore, this gaze was so sharp that the guard who was glanced at could not help but shrink back, as if an invisible knife had been placed on his neck. That's enough, don't make it difficult for him. He is just doing a job to support his family. After noticing Longdo's actions, Ima slowly opened his mouth to stop him. It's okay, I don't plan to do anything, don't worry. You don't plan to do anything. Or have you already done it? I've heard about the incident with Sakata. Although Yima was a little happy to see his grown-up son after a long time, he still put on a serious expression and mentioned the business he wanted to discuss with his son. Chapter 66. 3 days ago, the young master of the Rulon Group, Ryudo Kiryu, single-handedly resolved Sakata Minoru's rebellion. Not only was this miraculous deed widely spread outside, even the people in the Nest Duck prison were secretly discussing it. With Ikima's identity, he naturally had his own channels to collect information, and he was more aware of the ins and outs of the matter. After understanding that his father was about to get down to business, Ryudo also nodded solemnly and replied, "Indeed, after all, there are some things that have to be done. I understand you were also forced to do so. I can only blame myself for not dealing with things properly before coming in." As for Sakata's rebellion, Ikima actually didn't expect it beforehand, and now that he thought about it, he felt some lingering fear. Although his son was sitting in front of him, alive and kicking, Ikima could also imagine how much bloodshed he had experienced before coming here alive. If Sakata had colluded with outsiders, then the first thing he would have done was to eliminate Ryudo. But Ryudo was not killed, but instead he killed Sakata. This ability was far beyond Ikima's understanding of his son. "I've always wanted you to stay away from Extreme Tao, stay away from the Rulon Group, and live an ordinary life, but now it seems that I was too naive." Having said that, Ikima couldn't help but sigh, and at the same time, he unconsciously shook his head. Ikima lost his parents when he was young and spent his youth in an orphanage. Later, he was adopted by an Extreme Tao boss, and since then he embarked on the path of Extreme Tao for his adoptive father. As for his life, although he knew that he had always been on the wrong path, he never regretted it. Because from the beginning to the end, Ikima had no other choice. Whether it was because of friendship or loyalty, he could only go down this path to the end. Once you entered the extreme Tao industry, you could not leave it for the rest of your life. It was precisely because he knew that this path was a dead end that Akima did everything he could to get Ryudo out of it. But now it seemed that this was impossible. Even if Ichiro was dead, as long as the Rulon group was still around, there would be people who wanted Ryudo's life. Even if the Rulon group was gone, many people would not let go of Ryudo. He still had to die. However, after hearing his father's words, Ryudo shook his head and smiled. You're right. It's just that the enemy is too strong. The enemy? The one behind Sakata? Although Yima didn't know about the existence of eternal concubine Amami, but from the matter of him going to prison, he could also feel that there was a huge, invisible hand behind him pushing everything to happen. That's right. Your imprisonment should also be caused by that person. Unless we can match her, we won't be able to live according to our own wishes. At this point, Ryudo couldn't help but look up, as if he wanted to see the distant sky through the ceiling of the visitation room. Whether it was Ichiro's predicament, Ryudo's predicament, or Colored Glaze's predicament, in the end, it was caused by the lack of strength. Only with sufficient strength could humans freely choose their own way of living and not be forced to go with the flow by the general trend. Suddenly, Ryudo said, "Pops, I will find a way to get you out of here. You shouldn't continue to be imprisoned like this." I'm afraid it's a bit difficult. It's not a question of whether it's difficult or not, but whether it's necessary. In this cold nesting duck prison, Ryudo stood up and looked at his father for the last time. He smiled and said, "I'll go first. I hope to see you outside soon." After saying this, Ryudo looked at the guards with a, "Are you trying to break out of prison?" Under the vigilant gaze of the guards, he swaggered out of the door and enjoyed the prestige of a gangstar. Wait. Originally, Longdo planned to say, "The wind is bleak and the water is cold. My son has left and never returned." He left behind a handsome back and disappeared. Who knew that Ima would call out to him at the last moment? Is there anything else? After all, the person who interrupted him was his father. So Ryudo could only obediently turn his head and look. Although your physical fitness is good, you haven't received proper martial arts training since you were young, so you can't use your strength. Go find an old man called Furamaki Sotaro. He is the master of Furamaki-style martial arts, and is also my master. He can train you to be a talent. After throwing down these words, Ima also stood up from the stool, leaving behind a back view that said, "The wind is blowing and the water is cold. This old man will leave and never return." He directly left Longdo's line of sight. Good guy. You're still the best at acting. After being intimidated by Ima's handsome back, Longdo was also escorted out by the guards, as if he was a plague. Furamaki Sotaro is his father's teacher? On the way back, Ryudo kept thinking about what Ichiro said. Actually, even without Ichiro's reminder, Ryudo knew where his problem was. Although he had a LV3 physique, professional expert level physical fitness, but in other aspects, he was only at the level of a normal delinquent. A person's combat ability was mainly composed of physique, mentality, combat experience, and combat skills. Other than the first two, Ryudo was a complete mess in the last two. His fists were not good, and he did not know how to use knives or pistols. It was a waste of his good physique. Let alone the mercenaries from yesterday. Even if he faced a grandmaster of combat who was not as good as him, there was a high probability that he would not be their opponent. After all, the other person had seriously trained. His imitation of the tortoise fist style was completely like a monkey show to a real martial artist. If he really fought, he would be broken. So Ryudo also thought about whether or not he should find a dojo to train. Who knew that his father would recommend him a master who sounded amazing? Furamaki-style martial arts grandmaster, Furamaki Sotaro. Good guy. Looking at the aura of this sect, looking at the name of this grandmaster, it felt like a hidden master. Suddenly, the image of an old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion appeared in Longdo's mind. He was sitting alone in a dojo, meditating. Narukai mobilized all the intelligence under the Rulon group and searched the entire Tokyo area for an old man called Furamaki Sotaro. Yes, I will go immediately. So after getting off the car, Ryudo immediately ordered Narukai Otani to mobilize his brothers to search for the old man. After all, the Rulon Group's intelligence network was very powerful. It should not be difficult to find a master with a name. In fact, it was not difficult. On the same night, Ryudo received the whereabouts of the Grandmaster, Furamaki Sotaro. And according to his brother's report, the Grandmaster was now dancing in a nightclub. Chapter 67. The night was special for the Japanese. It was a good time to free themselves from the busy work and take the initiative to indulge in the bright neon lights. Especially at night in Tokyo, it was usually bustling with BMWs and cars. Even in the early morning of the next day, many main streets were still brightly lit. Among them, Ginza was undoubtedly an area rich in nightlife. Around 9 o'clock in the evening, it was the time for bars and nightclubs in Ginza to open. At night, colorful neon lights and fluorescent lights flickered, as if drowning people in the dazzling light and shadow. Just as the night in Ginza gradually became deep, a low-key black car slowly drove to a karaoke hall between 7 Chosum and 8 Chosum. There were quite a few high-end nightclubs in the Ginza area, and this hula jump bar karaoke hall was relatively low-end, so it also gathered a lot of embarrassed guests. Second Hokage, this is the place. As Narukai Otani opened the door, his direct superior, Ryudo, slowly walked out of the car and stood at the door of the hula jump bar karaoke hall. Before entering the door, he had already heard the noise of the dance floor and saw various neon lights flashing with psychedelic colors. There were many similar karaoke halls in Kamashicho, but Ryudo didn't come here to dance. The Furamaki school master actually likes to come to this kind of place. It's hard to understand. After shaking his head, Ryudo walked into the karaoke hall with Narukai. The noisy music, the crazy dancing crowd, such a place was a bit noisy for Ryudo, and he didn't like it. But in order to find the Furamaki school master who taught his father, Furamaki Sotaro, he still came here with a gift. Speaking of Furamaki Sotaro, this person was actually not difficult to find. People who often hang around in Ginza have probably seen such a strange old man. When Ryudo saw that figure on the lively dance floor, it was not difficult to understand why he had left a deep impression on so many people. The appearance of this Furamaki sect grandmaster was very different from what he had imagined. From the outside, Furamaki Sotaro looked like an ordinary old Japanese man. He had a short stature and a thin body. His face had a pointy mouth and monkey cheeks. He had the face of a monkey from Anime. A wisp of a coquettish mustache was combed into the shape of a brush and hung down below his chin. His pale hair was tied into a bun, and the clothes he was wearing were also the old style of the workers of the Showa era. To put it bluntly, Furamaki Sotaro not only did not have the demeanor of a master, but his appearance and dressing were also out of place in this noisy nightclub. So much so that Ryudo and Narukai could see the old man swaying his body on the dance floor even from a distance. From the perspective of the 5 attributes, this Grandmaster's attributes were really a bit awkward. His attributes were like this. Name, Furamaki Sotaro. Age, 69 years old. Attributes, Wisdom LV2, Physique LV2, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV1. Well, in addition to his courage and eyesight, his physique did not look like a martial arts expert at all. Of course, it may be related to his age. This guy, is he really the leader's master? Seeing this Furamaki sect grandmaster wriggling on the dance floor, leaning toward a young lady wearing a short skirt next to him, and pretending to inadvertently rub her, but Narukai really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But Ryudo shook his head and said seriously, as the saying goes, a great hermit hides in the city. Maybe this grandmaster is the kind of master who has returned to the natural state. Is that so? But no matter how you look at it, he is just a lecherous old man. Don't say that, he still has skills. You see, he has been rubbing that woman's butt for so long, and the woman didn't notice it. Maybe this is a special cultivation method? However, before Ryudo's voice fell, the woman who was being taken advantage of by the Furamaki sect grandmaster seemed to notice something. She turned her head and pointed at the old man's nose and scolded. Second generation leader. Isn't he discovered? And it looks like he is about to be slapped. Ahem, he was indeed discovered. But when this woman slaps him in a while, he will definitely use a handsome body movement to dodge, pa. Before he finished speaking, a crisp slap had passed through the dance floor and entered the ears of Ryudo and Narukai. The woman who slapped the lecherous old man after being taken advantage of left, leaving only Furamaki Sotaro with a red mark on his face to continue swaying on the dance floor. Looking at his calm and composed appearance, it was as if nothing had happened and everything was just a dream. Such a thick-skinned grandmaster level really made people admire him. Second generation leader. This, don't talk to me for the time being, I have a headache. However, after seeing this scene, Ryudo couldn't help but walk to the bar and ask for a glass of fresh milk with ice. He raised his head and gulped it down. Don't ask why Ryudo asked for fresh milk with ice. It was because he was only 16 years old and was not an adult yet. He couldn't drink indiscriminately and could only drink milk to relieve his worries. Damn it. How could such a decent person like his father have such a lecherous master? And looking at his appearance, he didn't look like he could fight at all. What's going on? After drinking the milk in the glass, Ryudo put the glass on the table and sighed deeply. He seemed to feel that his future was full of troubles and that he had never met a decent person. However, he didn't know whether it was Ryudo's yellow hair that was too dazzling or the way he used milk to relieve his worries that was too funny. Therefore, the two young men who looked like gangsters immediately laughed and mocked. Little brat, if you like to drink milk so much, don't come to this kind of place. Go home and drink it. After hearing these words that were obviously looking for trouble, Narukai, who was standing behind Ryudo, couldn't hold it in anymore. Hey, are the two of you looking for? Wait, don't do it here. Just as Narukai Otani was about to press the two young men on the table and teach them a lesson, Ryudo stopped him. Sorry, I was rude. I shouldn't have done it at this time. After understanding that the second generation head was doing something important and didn't want to cause trouble, Narukai took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his anger. However, Ryudo shook his head and moved his mouth towards Furamaki Sotaro, who was still having fun on the dance floor not far away. He smiled and said, "If you want to fight, don't fight here. Go to the dance floor and fight." The dance floor? Ah, I understand. Narukai was also a smart person. He immediately understood what Ryudo meant. Therefore, he turned his head and grabbed the two young men's collars without hesitation. Like pulling two chicks, he threw them in the direction of Furamaki Sotaro. Chapter 68. Ryudo's meaning was obvious. Since it was the two punks who came to cause trouble first, he should just do it. Talking to them would be a waste of time. But since he already made a move, he might as well use this opportunity to test if the disco master had any real skills. After all, although Yima had learned a few moves from Furamaki Sotaro, it was many years ago. Who knows if this old man had Alzheimer's? Then wouldn't he be a perverted old man who only knows how to rub people's butts? Bang! Accompanied by two strange sounds, the two punks were grabbed by Narukai and thrown to the ground. Someone is fighting. Oh, good fight. Hurry up and do it. Don't push, just watch the monkey. As the two punks were thrown to the ground, the young people who were dancing on the dance floor quickly moved away. Their faces were even filled with smiles and excitement. In this kind of nightclub, there would be people fighting almost every night. Everyone was used to it. Even the bodyguards in this Lalaba disco were too lazy to care about the people who were fighting. At most, they would drag someone out and throw them into the garbage after they fell to the ground. Bastard. You. Poi. The two punks who were thrown to the dance floor by Narukai immediately tried to stand up and fight, but the former directly kicked the unlucky guy on the left in the chest. Although Narukai Otani's current identity was Ryudo's assistant and driver, he was still a veteran in the underworld for many years. Fighting was a common occurrence for him. His kick was fast and ruthless. It was full of momentum. It kicked the guy back like a rubber ball. The most important thing was that Furamaki Sotaro was right behind this guy. TSK. Seeing the punks coming towards him, Furamaki Sotaro couldn't do anything. A glimmer of light flashed through his seemingly old and dim eyes. His entire body flashed to the right with a strange movement technique, nimbly avoiding the unexpected disaster that was about to crash into him. This good guy. At this time, Ryudo, who was carefully watching Furamaki Sotaro, couldn't help but light up. Just now, the old man's movement was very smooth, like a fish in water. In a flash, he bypassed the crowd and arrived at a safe place. Expert, definitely an expert. Even though Long Do's eyes were fixed on the old man, he still couldn't see how the old man moved. He only felt the old man's figure disappear with a whoosh. Wait, gone? Where did he go? When Long Do came to his senses, he realized that Tai Lang of Gumuzong had already disappeared into the bustling crowd behind him. No, I have to catch up with him. So Ryudo's figure also quickly rushed in that direction. He directly used his hand to push the crowd and crazily squeezed inside. There were still cheers and shouts coming from the dance floor behind him. Obviously, Narukai was still happily educating the two punks. But Ryudo had already rushed out of the disco's back door in the blink of an eye and came to a slightly gloomy alley. In Tokyo, there were many maze-like alleys with many twists and turns. Many of them were gathering places for vagrants or punks, so ordinary people wouldn't casually enter here. The moment Long Do entered the alley, he saw a few rascals surrounding him and sucking on something. Then, those rascals looked at him strangely. Humph. If ordinary people were looked at by this group of drug addicts, they would inevitably feel fear. But Ryudo didn't hesitate to respond with a cold snort. In his view, this group of people with cerebral palsy hiding in the alley was a group of garbage. A group of social garbage that was dirty wherever they went. They were worse than animals. So Ryudo turned his head and looked at the other side of the alley. He just happened to see Furamaki Sotaro's figure that was about to disappear into the darkness. Don't think about running away. Unworthy old pervert master. Ryudo also quickly chased in the direction where Furamaki Sotaro ran. There were a lot of debris in the alley, and it was quite difficult to walk. But the old man Furamaki quickly ran forward as if he was used to it. If it was an ordinary person, he would definitely not be able to catch up with him. But Ryudo benefited from the physique of a professional. He still followed closely behind in this complicated environment. Sotaro ran, Ryudo chased. Sotaro continued to run. Ryudo continued to chase. The two of them, one running, one chasing, one running, inexplicably lasted for a full half an hour. That brat. Who is that brat? Why do you keep chasing after me and not letting me go? After running for half an hour, from Ginza Mokom to Ginza Kaidakom, and then back to Ginza Mokom, the old man, who was chased for more than a dozen streets, finally couldn't take it anymore. Huff, huff, huff. Stop, stop. Suddenly, Furamaki Sotaro panted as he came to an open space next to a small alley. He stretched out his hand and made a stop gesture to Ryudo behind him. You finally stopped running? When the chase finally came to an end, although Long Do was also panting heavily, he was naturally much better off than a certain 69-year-old comrade. If you don't chase me, I won't run. If you don't run, why would I chase you? Is it because I've been rubbing against the girls? But this. After being rebuked by Ryudo, Furamaki frowned and could only take a deep breath. After taking a deep breath, the old man also returned to his usual master demeanor. He raised his chin and asked in a casual tone, "Young man, why are you looking for me?" Ryudo smiled and replied in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing, "I want to be your disciple." Disciple? I see. But why do I have to teach you? My father is Kirishima Kazuma. He asked me to come to you. There was a hint of pride in Long Do's voice when he said this. In his opinion, since Sotaro was his father's master, then the two of them should have some master and disciple relationship. He should not hesitate to accept him as a disciple. Who knew that Furamaki Sotaro's face changed when he heard the name and said in an angry tone, "It's him. That bastard asked you to come here. You're that bastard's son?" Different from before, Furamaki Sotaro's tone was obviously angry, which made Ryudo feel that something was wrong. That's not right? Logically speaking, aren't they master and disciple? Why would Furamaki Kazuma? I'll never forget that day. Just when Ryudo was puzzled and trying to figure out the relationship between the two, Furamaki Sotaro gritted his teeth and said seriously, he dared to steal my title of master of the dance floor in the nightclub. He beat me in dancing. I'm not worthy of being his disciple. What? Before he finished speaking, Ryudo's expression became very interesting, and the image of the Rulon group in his mind was subtly distorted. Chapter 69. In Ryudo's heart, what was the image of the biological father? And Rulon Group, S leader, Kiryu Kazuma? First of all, he was an indomitable man. Whether it was his appearance, aura, or behavior, they all showed the word hardcore. People could not help but admire him. However, Furamaki Sotaro said that the disciple beat him in dancing and also took away his title of master of the dance floor in the nightclub. From this short sentence, there were actually a few very important information that could be extracted. First, Kiryu Kazuma went to nightclubs. Second, Kiryu Kazuma's disco dancing skills were very good. Third, Furamaki Sotaro was a stingy person. As if he saw Ryudo's expression of disbelief, Furamaki said indignantly, "What? You don't believe it?" "It's not that I don't believe it. It's just that it feels a little different from the old man I know. He only stopped after he got married and had a child. Before he was completely serious on the surface, but the degree of inwardly flirtatious was not much worse than me. It seems like you still have some understanding of your inwardly flirtatious nature. How rare." Just like this, the old and the young found a place to sit down. Ryudo also listened to Furamaki talk about Kiryu Kazuma's past. According to the old man, Kazuma was not only the master of the dance floor. He played a lot of things. Not completely counting, Kazuma used to be a frequent customer of Kamishitachi's pub, massage parlor, bath parlor, PR club, casino, disco, KTV, performance hall, and other places. At the same time, he was also a master of baseball, golf, claw machine, arcade, boise, mahjong, shogi, darts, table tennis, bowling, billiards, and other small entertainment games. That guy's favorite songs were Kamishitachi's Snow Moon Flower, Machine Kiss, Me 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 Me, and he especially liked to sing with the girls in the nightclub. He was so shameless. Speaking of this, Furamaki Sotaro showed a look of disdain. Because every time he went to the nightclub with Kazuma, the girls ignored him and squeezed to Kazuma's side. So that's how it is. That old-fashioned old man actually had such a wonderful past. After hearing so many stories about his biological father, Ryudo felt like crying and laughing. He originally thought that Kazuma was a decent person, who knew that he became decent after getting married and having children. He used to be this kind of a slut. However, since Yima grew up on the streets and his adoptive father was a member of Extreme Path, it was only natural that he would be influenced by these things from a young age. What's more, after he got married, he decisively chose to live in seclusion and no longer wandered around. So Ryudo had no reason to blame him, as long as he didn't have a bunch of illegitimate children outside. After talking about the past, the old man couldn't help but sigh and said, "Speaking of which, that was a matter of 10 or 20 years ago. Time really flies." Since Kazuma founded the Rulon Group, he rarely contacted Sotaro. The two master and disciple could be said to have become strangers. But Sotaro didn't blame him because Sotaro knew that this was because Kazuma didn't want him to be involved in the grudges of Kamishitachi. So he took the initiative to distance himself. At this time, Ryudo also smiled and complimented. Isn't that so? But seeing that you can still be energetic after being chased by me for more than 10 streets, old man will definitely be happy. Humph, don't flatter me. Anyway, it must be that Kazuma has too many enemies outside, and he's afraid that you will be in trouble outside. So he thought of this old man. More or less. Anyway, there are indeed tens of thousands of people who want to kill me now. Can you teach me a few moves? You're exaggerating. In fact, it's not impossible to teach you, but it depends on whether you're cut out for it. Suddenly, Furamaki Sotaro stepped back a little and carefully looked at Ryudo from top to bottom. After all, the reason why Tong Shinjima was chosen by him to teach him the ancient Mu-style martial arts was mainly because of his extraordinary talent. If he was born in the Warring States period, Kazuma would definitely become a famous samurai. This was Sotaro's evaluation at that time. In fact, this was indeed the case. When Kazuma learned the Furamaki-style martial arts, he once swept the largest underground fighting arena in Kamishitachi, the Sai River Underground Fighting Arena, and created the legend of undefeated in 100 battles. When he met with Kazuma yesterday, Ryudo saw the attribute value and confirmed this point. After all, the physical attribute of the leader actually reached the LV4 physique, international warrior level. Exaggerated physical attributes and rich combat experience, coupled with the Furamaki-style paleo martial arts system, it was no wonder that Kazuma could make a name for himself in Kamishitachi. Even if there were 70 or 80 punks, they wouldn't be enough to beat him. After feeling Sotaro's doubts, Ryudo also straightened his back and said confidently, I just chased you for more than a dozen streets. Do you think my physical attributes are not good enough? With Ryudo's current LV3 physique, professional master level physical ability, not to mention other things, in this age group, it was definitely a monster level. After all, how many minors had the physical attributes of a professional player? But Sotaro shook his head and said, there's nothing to say about physical attributes, but learning the Furamaki-style martial arts doesn't rely on strength, but on comprehension. Of course I know this, but my brain is still... Forget it, it's just average. It's useless to say more. In short, first punch me and see. After saying that, Sotaro stood up and walked to the side of the open space. Me? Punch you? Although Ryudo also followed, he was a bit surprised by this request. The Furamaki-style martial arts is a martial arts of self-defense. It is not proud of taking the initiative to attack. The strongest 3 profound skills of the style are all counterattacking skills. At this time, Sotaro put on the demeanor of a master and slowly said with his hands behind his back, Martial arts of self-defense. Focused on running? This is my escape route. Something like that? Although he felt that the Furamaki-style martial arts had dropped to the extreme, Ryudo still obediently put on a posture and punched towards Sotaro, who happened to be in attack range. This punch didn't have any skill to speak of, but the speed and strength were very good. It reflected Ryudo's fighting principle of random punches can kill the master. But just as he punched out the moment when he didn't hit the opponent, the short body in front of him suddenly flashed. Then Ryudo's fist stopped in midair. This. In that instant, Ryudo felt as if he was hit by a body freezing technique. His whole body was stiff to the point that he couldn't move, and his breathing also suddenly stopped. This kind of complete stagnation lasted for more than a second. How is it? Can't move, right? Seeing that Ryudo finally knelt down with his hands on his stomach, Sotaro on the side smiled and said, This is the profound skill of the Furamaki-style martial arts of the 3 profound skills. Its name is Tiger Fall. After not using this move for a long time, Sotaro's aura became completely different from before. He looked like a sect master. You're tuning in to the Echo Reads YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.